Welcome to World War II Stories for Sleep. Tonight, there is nothing urgent for you to do. There is nowhere you need to go, nothing you need to finish, and nothing you need to hold tightly in your mind. For the next little while, you may simply settle into the quiet, let your body become heavier, and allow this slow story to move around you like rain on an old London window. This is not a story of battle. This is not a story of noise or fear or sudden movement. This is a quiet story from the softer edges of wartime history. A story of ordinary people in an extraordinary time finding rest where they could, sharing warmth, lowering their voices, passing cups of tea, folding blankets, and waiting gently for morning. Tonight we go to London during the Second World War. Not to the loudest streets, not to the dramatic moments remembered in headlines, but to a quieter place beneath the city, a shelter under the ground. A long, dim space of brick, concrete, wooden benches, wool blankets, enamel mugs, old coats, soft footsteps, tired faces, and low lamps glowing gently in the darkness. Above, the city is darkened by blackout curtains. Windows are covered. Street lamps are dimmed. The river moves through the night. Rain falls lightly on roofs, pavements, railings, chimneys, and empty streets. And below, in the shelter, people make a small world of patience. A world of whispering voices. A world of folded blankets. A world of warm tea. A world where one person watches over a sleeping child, another reads a letter by lamplight, another closes tired eyes against a wool coat, and the long night slowly becomes something softer. So let your shoulders relax. Let your hands rest. Let your breathing become natural and slow. You do not need to breathe in any special way. You do not need to count. Only notice, if you like, that the breath comes in and the breath goes out, like the tide. Like the rain, like a train passing far away beneath the city, the story will be slow. The story will be calm. Nothing sudden will happen here. Nothing will ask you to be alert. If you drift away, the words will continue softly. If you come back, you will find the same warm shelter, the same low light, the same quiet London night waiting for you. Imagine now that the modern room around you becomes softer at the edges. The light fades. The day loosens its hold. The thoughts of the day begin to settle, one by one, like dust in lamplight. And somewhere far away in time, beyond the present, beyond the noise of modern streets, there is London at night. The rain is gentle. The sky is low. The buildings stand dark and close together, their windows covered with heavy curtains and cloth. A narrow street shines under a thin layer of rain. The brick walls are dark and damp. A bicycle leans against a railing. A newspaper, softened by water, rests near the curb. A cat moves under a gate and disappears into a shadow. Somewhere behind a covered window, a kettle is being lifted from a stove. Somewhere else, a mother folds a blanket into a bag. And along the pavement, quietly, without hurry, people make their way toward the shelter. The city is not asleep exactly. It is holding itself still. London has many sounds, even at night. Water in gutters, distant footsteps, a door closing gently, the low murmur of voices behind a curtain, the faint movement of a train far below, rain tapping on metal railings, a horse shifting in a stable yard, a bus passing somewhere far off with its lights dimmed. But all of these sounds are softened by the hour, by the weather, and by the habit of speaking quietly after dark. On one corner, a small sign points toward the shelter entrance. The sign is plain. It does not need to be grand. Those who live nearby know where to go. They have walked this way many times before, carrying blankets, thermos flasks, old pillows, paper bags, books, knitting, letters, and small comforts from home. Tonight the rain makes the pavement shine. The shelter entrance lies at the bottom of a short set of steps, half hidden beneath the street. A hooded lamp glows faintly near the doorway. Not bright, never bright, only enough to show the way. The steps are damp from many feet. A handrail runs along the wall, cold beneath the touch. At the top of the steps, the air smells of rain, brick, smoke, wet wool, and the city's long working day. At the bottom, the air changes. It becomes warmer, closer, heavier. It carries the scent of people gathered together for the night. Tea, blankets, damp coats, dust, old wood, concrete, a little coal smoke clinging to clothing, the faint sweetness of a child's biscuit wrapped in paper. The shelter receives each person quietly. A woman named Margaret descends the steps slowly, holding a folded blanket under one arm and a small brown bag in the other hand. She's not old, but the week has made her tired. Her coat is dark and practical, buttoned high at the throat. A scarf covers her hair. Rain beads on the shoulders of the coat and darkens the wool. Beside her, a boy of 8 or 9 carries a pillow nearly too large for him. His name is Peter. He walks carefully, placing each foot on the wet step as if entering a place that belongs to grown-ups and sleep at the same time. Behind them, an elderly man with a rolled blanket over one shoulder pauses to catch his breath. A young woman helps him by taking the small bag from his hand. No one makes much of this. It is simply what one does when the stairs are damp and the night is long. Margaret reaches the bottom and steps into the shelter. The first feeling is always the change in sound. Above, the rain was open and scattered across the whole street. Below, the rain becomes distant. It is still there, somewhere beyond brick and pavement, but softened now, like a memory of weather. In the shelter, the sounds are closer. A kettle being poured, a low conversation, a child whispering. Boots on concrete. A wooden bench creaking, a page turning. Someone coughing gently into a handkerchief. Someone saying, not loudly, that there is space a little farther down. The shelter is long and low, with curved walls in places and straight brick in others, depending on where it was built and how the space has been adapted. Lamps hang at intervals, shaded and warm, leaving pools of amber light separated by softer stretches of shadow. The shadows are not frightening. They are the kind of shadows that come when many tired people gather in a safe, dim place and allow the night to become smaller. Wooden benches line the walls. Some have numbers painted nearby, but the marks are faded and not important to the story. There are blankets folded on laps, coats used as pillows, bags tucked under seats, enamel mugs balanced carefully, and small personal worlds arranged within a few feet of space. Margaret and Peter find their usual spot near a brick pillar, not too close to the entrance, not too far from the lamp. The bench is hard but familiar. Margaret places the blanket down first, then the bag, then helps Peter arrange his pillow against the wall. He's trying to be brave in the quiet way children sometimes try to be brave, by doing exactly what he has been told to do, without complaint. Margaret notices, but she does not praise him too much. Too much praise might make the effort feel heavier. Instead, she says softly, "There we are, just here." Peter nods and sits. The pillow looks large beside him. His shoes do not quite reach the floor when he sits back. Margaret opens the bag and takes out a thermos, 2 enamel mugs, a wrapped sandwich, a small tin of biscuits, and a book with a worn cover. The book has been read before, many times. Its corners are soft, its pages are slightly loose. The title is not important. What matters is that it belongs to them, that it has come down into the shelter on many nights, that Peter knows the shape of it in his mother's hand. The thermos gives a small metal click when Margaret opens it. Steam rises faintly. Tea. Not elegant tea, not strong enough perhaps, not fresh in the way a person might wish, but hot, and hot is enough. She pours a little into Peter's mug first, then into her own. The smell of tea spreads into the nearby air, mixing with wool, damp brick and the warm dust of the lamps. Peter holds the mug carefully in both hands. Margaret reminds him that it is hot. He nods, already knowing, already pleased by the warmth. Across from them, on the opposite bench, a woman with knitting in her lap smiles briefly. She has seen them before. Margaret smiles back. No introductions are needed tonight. In shelters, people can become familiar without becoming fully known. A face seen many evenings, a scarf remembered, a cough recognised, a child growing more comfortable on the same bench, a man always carrying the same folded newspaper, a woman always knitting something grey. Names are sometimes exchanged, sometimes not. But the shelter creates a temporary neighbourhood beneath the city, a street below the street, a quiet room made of strangers and routine. Further down the shelter, an elderly couple have already settled in. The man sits with his back very straight, a folded coat beneath his head though he is not lying down. The woman beside him has removed her gloves and placed them neatly in her lap. Between them is a small basket with a cloth over it. Every so often she lifts the cloth and checks something inside, perhaps bread, perhaps medicine, perhaps simply the thing she feels better having within reach. A few benches away, a young clerk in a dark coat is reading by the light of a lamp, his eyes moving slowly over the same page. He's too tired to read properly, but the act of holding the book helps him remain calm. Near the far wall, two children sit under one blanket, whispering to each other until their mother lowers her hand gently and they become quiet again. The shelter is not silent. It could never be silent with so many people breathing, shifting, settling and trying to rest. But it has its own kind of quiet, a human quiet, a shared quiet. The quiet of people agreeing without saying so that loudness would not help the night. A man near the entrance shakes rain from his hat, remembers where he is and does it more softly. Someone moves a bag with care so it does not scrape too loudly on the floor. A mother breaks a biscuit in half rather than opening the tin too often. A man folds his newspaper slowly because the paper crackles in the low space. Small adjustments, small kindnesses. The shelter lives by them. Margaret takes off Peter's damp outer scarf and replaces it with a drier one from the bag. He lets her do it, though he is old enough to pretend he does not need help. The new scarf smells faintly of home, soap, and the cupboard where it was kept. He leans back against the pillow. His mug rests in his lap. Margaret folds the blanket across his knees. The bench is hard and the air is close, but the blanket is thick enough, and the tea is warm enough, and the lamp is low enough to make the space feel less like a public shelter, and more like a narrow, improvised bedroom shared with half the street. Above them, London remains dark. Rain runs along gutters. Water drips from window ledges. The covered windows of houses hold their light inside. In one kitchen, a kettle cools on a stove. In another, a cat sleeps on a chair. A row of terraced houses stands with blacked-out windows, their brick fronts shining wet under the faintest light. A tram line glistens in the street. A postbox stands at the corner, red hidden by darkness and rain. The city is still there, but from the shelter it feels far away, as if London itself has become a blanket folded over those below. Peter sips his tea too soon and makes a small face because it is hot. Margaret notices and smiles with only her eyes. He waits, then tries again. This time it is better. The warmth moves through him. He holds the mug near his chest and listens to the shelter. A baby murmurs somewhere down the line. A man clears his throat. The knitting needles across the way make a faint, careful sound. A wooden bench creaks. A lamp hums softly or seems to. Someone pours tea from another thermos. The sound is comforting because it is ordinary. Tea being poured, a blanket being folded, a page turning, a child breathing. These ordinary sounds are stronger than fear tonight. They give the mind places to rest. Margaret opens the book. She does not begin reading aloud immediately. She lets Peter settle. She turns a few pages until she finds the place where they left off, though neither of them truly cares if it is the correct place. The book is not for plot tonight. It is for the sound of a voice, a familiar voice. A voice kept low so that nearby people can rest, but clear enough for a child beside her to hear. Before she begins, she looks along the shelter. The lamps make small golden islands. People sit inside them with coats, blankets, bags, and tired hands. There is something deeply moving about it, though she would not say so. So many people, all making do, all trying to keep their small routines alive underground, all carrying bits of home with them. A mug, a blanket, a cushion, a photograph, a sandwich, a deck of cards, a book, a knitted scarf, a thermos, a folded letter. Home has been broken into portable pieces and brought below the street. Margaret begins to read. Her voice is soft, not theatrical, not lively, only steady. Peter leans against her arm. He does not follow every word. He follows the rhythm, the rise and fall, the pauses, the way his mother's voice makes the shelter less strange. Across from them, the woman with the knitting continues her slow work. The needles move, pause, move again. Wool gathers into shape one row at a time. In a place where the larger world feels uncertain, knitting offers a very small certainty. A stitch follows a stitch. A row follows a row. Something useful grows quietly in the hands. The elderly man nearby closes his eyes, though he is not asleep. His wife adjusts the basket at her feet. and pulls her gloves back on because her fingers have cooled. The young clerk lowers his book to his lap. The page remains open, but his eyes rest on nothing. Margaret reads on. The shelter grows calmer, not because everyone is asleep, not yet, but because the act of settling is spreading. Coats become pillows, bags become footrests, blankets are shared, children lean into parents, the hard benches become familiar again, the low lamps become moons beneath the city. A shelter warden walks slowly along the passage, checking that people have what they need, that the walkway is clear, that no bag is where someone may trip. His footsteps are measured. He knows the floor well. He knows which part echoes and which part stays quiet. He carries a small shaded lamp and a notebook. Now and then, someone asks him a question in a low voice. He answers quietly. No fuss, no hurry. His presence is reassuring not because he says anything grand, but because he moves as if the night can be managed. He passes Margaret and Peter. Margaret looks up. He nods. She nods back. Peter watches the lamp move down the shelter, a small circle of light passing over blankets, shoes, bags, and tired faces before it becomes part of the deeper dimness. The warden pauses near an elderly woman whose blanket has slipped. He bends and lifts the edge of it back over her knees. She thanks him without opening her eyes. He moves on. This is the kind of care that belongs to night. Small, practical, almost invisible. In another place, a blanket being lifted might mean nothing. Here, it is part of how the shelter becomes gentle. Outside, the rain grows a little stronger. Those near the entrance hear it more clearly, a soft rushing sound on the steps and street above. Farther inside, it is only a murmur. The rain is welcome in a strange way. It gives the night a continuous sound. It covers the little noises of bodies settling. It makes the city feel washed and softened. It gives those underground something steady to listen to besides their own thoughts. Rain on London, rain on bricks, rain on roofs, rain on the blacked out windows, rain on empty market stalls, rain on iron railings, rain on the shelter entrance, rain becoming memory by the time it reaches the people below. Margaret's reading slows. She can feel Peter growing heavier against her. His mug is empty now. She takes it gently from his hands before it can slip. He makes a small sound of protest, not awake enough to mean it. She places the mug in the bag. Then she pulls the blanket higher around him. His eyes are still half open, but not looking at anything. The shelter lights blur for him. The brick wall behind the opposite bench becomes soft. The knitting needles become a tiny rhythm. His mother's voice becomes less like words and more like warmth. He is not asleep yet. He is near it. That is enough. Margaret continues reading for a little longer, though she knows he is no longer following the story. The words are for the space now, for herself, for the woman knitting, for the elderly couple, for the shelter as a whole. A soft voice in a dim place can smooth the edges of a long night. After a while, she lowers the book. Peter's head rests against her coat. His breathing has changed, slower, deeper. She waits until she is sure, then closes the book with one finger marking the place. She does not move him yet. To move a sleeping child too soon is to risk waking him. So she stays still, one arm around him, one hand resting on the closed book. The shelter breathes around them. Near the entrance, someone arrives late, apologizing quietly for stepping past knees and bags. A space is made. People shift. A blanket is lifted. A bag is tucked closer beneath a bench. No one complains. The late arrival sits, exhales, removes wet gloves, and lowers their head. The shelter absorbs one more person. This too is part of its work. To receive, to make room, to become larger than it appears. A shelter is not only brick and concrete. It is also the willingness of tired people to move their bags 6 inches so someone else can sit. The warden returns toward the entrance. He checks the stairwell. Rainwater has gathered on the lower step, but not enough to trouble anyone. He makes a note to clear it later. For now, he places the lamp where it gives the best light without shining into sleeping eyes. He listens. The sound above is distant. The sound below is human and low. He has spent many nights in spaces like this. At first, he used to notice everything, every cough, every question, every anxious face. Now he notices differently. He hears the overall tone of the shelter. Tonight, the tone is calm, crowded, damp, tired, but calm. That is good. He walks back along the benches, slower now. A child has fallen asleep with one hand still holding a biscuit. The mother gently removes it and wraps it in paper for later. An old man's head has tipped forward onto his chest. A young woman writes a letter on her lap, using a book as a desk, her pencil moving carefully so the paper does not tear. Two sisters share a blanket and whisper, until one of them falls asleep mid-sentence. A man in work clothes leans back with his cap over his eyes. His hands are rough and still. The warden sees all of this and says nothing. The shelter is doing what it is meant to do. It is holding people through the night. Margaret's arm begins to ache where Peter leans on it, but she does not move. The ache is minor, the sleep is precious. She watches the rain-dark coats hanging near the entrance. She watches the lamplight on the brick. She watches the woman with the knitting finally place the needles in her bag and fold the wool carefully. The woman catches Margaret's eye and gives a small smile, then nods toward Peter. Margaret smiles back. A small community exists in that nod. No words, only recognition. You have him settled. Yes, he's asleep. Good. The shelter settles deeper. The first part of the night has passed. People have arrived, tea has been poured, benches have been claimed, blankets have been arranged, children have been read to, the latecomers have found space, the warden has walked his rounds, and now the shelter enters its long middle, the hour when the city above grows distant and the underground room becomes its own world. This is the hour of slow breathing, the hour of dim lamps, the hour of heads leaning against coats, the hour of rain far above, the hour when a person may wake slightly, adjust a blanket, hear a familiar murmur, and fall back asleep. For you, listening now, there is nothing more you need to do. You may rest in this same hour. You may imagine the low shelter lamps and the old brick walls. You may imagine rain softened by distance. You may imagine a warm mug wrapped in two hands. You may imagine a wool blanket folded across your knees. You may imagine the steady hush of people breathing together in a long room beneath London. Nothing sudden, nothing sharp, only a quiet shelter, only rain, only lamplight, only wool, only tea, only the slow, patient kindness of ordinary people making a small place of rest under the sleeping city. The long middle of the night settles over the shelter gently. It does not arrive all at once. It gathers slowly after the cups have been emptied, after the first stories have been read, after the last people have found their places on the benches, after the children have begun to lean heavily against coats and blankets, after the warden has passed twice along the walkway and found nothing that needs more than a small adjustment. The shelter becomes less like a place people have entered and more like a place that is holding them. A low room beneath the city, a warm dim passage of brick and concrete, a temporary bedroom made of benches, bags, coats, scarves, pillows, folded blankets, and tired patients. Above, rain continues on London. Below, the sound of it is soft and far away. Margaret remains still for as long as she can, letting Peter sleep against her side. His head rests near her shoulder. His hair smells faintly of rain, soap, and the wool scarf she replaced earlier. Every now and then, his breathing catches in the small, uneven way of a child drifting through dreams, and then it settles again. She holds the closed book in one hand. Her other hand rests lightly on the blanket over his knees. The blanket rises and falls almost imperceptibly. Rise, fall, rise, fall. A small motion, but enough to remind her that he is warm, asleep, and safe for this hour. Around them, other people are entering their own small pockets of rest. The elderly man across the way has finally allowed his back to curve a little. His wife has placed her gloved hands on top of the basket in her lap and closed her eyes. The young clerk with the open book has stopped pretending to read. His chin lowers slowly, then lifts again, then lowers once more. The book remains open on his knees, but the printed lines have dissolved into shadow. A woman farther down the shelter lies on her side across a bench, one arm folded beneath her head, a coat over her shoulders. Her shoes remain neatly under the bench, toes aligned, as if even sleep should keep a little order. A baby sighs in a bundle of blankets and is rocked twice by a mother who is almost asleep herself. The shelter does not become silent, but the sounds become slower. There are fewer new arrivals now, fewer bags being shifted, fewer tins opening, fewer whispered questions. What remains is the soft maintenance of rest. A person turning carefully so as not to wake the neighbour beside them. A blanket being pulled higher. A shoe scraping once and then going still. A hand finding a mug in the dark and deciding not to drink. A quiet cough swallowed quickly into a handkerchief. The lamps make the brick walls glow in patches. Amber light, then shadow. Amber light, then shadow. The shelter seems longer in the dimness, as if it extends beyond sight into some calm underground distance. The brick pillars are dark at their bases and warm at their edges. The floor has a faint shine from damp shoes, and the night's rain carried in on soles. A few drops of water near the entrance reflect the nearest lamp. They look almost like tiny stars fallen onto concrete. The warden notices them as he passes, and later, perhaps, he will wipe them away. But for now, they do no harm. The rain above grows steadier, not violent, not loud, only full. It runs down drain pipes, gathers along gutters, taps on the metal hoods over basement windows, beads on iron railings, falls from the edges of awnings, and slips into the cracks between paving stones. London is washed in darkness. The blackout curtains hold. The streets are mostly empty. A tram track glistens like a pair of thin black ribbons. Shop fronts sit behind shuttered glass. A milk cart waits somewhere under cover for morning. The river moves with its slow, hidden strength, dark beneath bridges, carrying reflected lights that are fewer than in peacetime but still enough to tremble on the water. All of this is above the sleepers. All of this is distant. In the shelter, the rain becomes a lullaby. Peter dreams of rain without knowing he is dreaming. In the dream, rain falls on a garden he remembers from a summer that feels very far away. A garden path, a bucket near a wall, a patch of wet earth, leaves shining. Then the dream changes, as dreams do, and the garden becomes the shelter wall, and the leaves become the warm shapes of lamps, and the rain becomes his mother's hand resting lightly on the blanket. He shifts against Margaret. She looks down, waits, and when he settles again, she lets out a breath she had not meant to hold. There is a rhythm to watching a sleeping child. One listens more than one intends. One notices every change, a foot moving, a hand opening, a breath becoming shallow, then deep. The watching becomes almost like sleep itself, except for the small thread of care that remains awake. Margaret knows this thread well. It is the thread that has run through many nights. At home when Peter had a fever, on trains when he fell asleep too close to the window, in crowded rooms when she needed to keep one ear open. Now, under London, the thread remains, soft, strong, unseen. The woman who had been knitting has put the grey wool into a cloth bag, but one needle still peeks out from the fold. Her hands are now still. They rest palm down on her skirt. She has closed her eyes, though her posture is upright and proper, as if she may wake at any moment and resume the row exactly where she left it. A strand of yarn lies across her lap like a quiet line. It has not yet been cut. It connects the unfinished work in the bag to the stillness of her hands. The shelter is full of unfinished things resting for the night. A letter half written, a book half read, a sandwich half eaten and wrapped again. A conversation paused, a thought of home left unspoken. A child's question delayed until morning. A sock not quite darned, a prayer not fully formed. But unfinished things can rest too. They do not need to be solved before sleep comes. They can wait in bags, in pockets, in notebooks, in folded hands, until morning gives them shape again. Margaret lets the book slide gently into the bag without fully moving Peter. The worn cover disappears beside the thermos and the empty mugs. She touches the thermos cap to make sure it is closed properly. The motion is automatic, domestic, almost soothing. A cap tightened, a cup tucked away, a blanket straightened, a bag moved closer to the foot. These are small actions, but they make a place feel manageable. The shelter is too large to control. The wall beyond it is much too large to control. But a bag can be closed, a mug can be placed safely, a sleeping child can be covered. The mind rests in what the hands can do. A little farther down, the young woman writing a letter pauses with her pencil in the air. Her paper rests on a book balanced over her knees. She has written several lines, perhaps more than she expected. The pencil point has grown dull. She does not sharpen it. Instead, she reads the last line and then looks toward the lamps. Her face is calm but tired. Writing letters in shelters is a strange activity, half private and half public. The words are meant for someone far away, but the act of writing happens among many strangers, under shared light, with other people's breathing all around. Still, the pencil moves again, slowly, carefully, not too much, only enough to finish a thought. Then she folds the paper, not sealed yet, only folded. The letter can wait. The shelter has many kinds of waiting. Waiting for morning, waiting for sleep, waiting for tea to cool, waiting for a child to settle, waiting for the rain to pass, waiting for footsteps to stop echoing, waiting for the body to find a position on a hard bench that is not comfortable, but possible, waiting for thoughts to soften, waiting for the world above to feel distant enough that the eyes can close. The middle of the night teaches waiting as gently as it can. The warden reaches the far end of the shelter and pauses. He stands beneath a lamp making a small note in his book. The note is practical, nothing dramatic. The number of people, a request for more blankets if available, a damp patch near the entrance, an elderly woman who may need help going up the steps later. He writes with a pencil tied to the notebook by string. The string is frayed. The notebook has softened at the corners. His handwriting is neat enough. He closes the book and looks along the shelter. From where he stands, the people become shapes of coats and blankets. The lamps make a slow line through the dimness. He hears rain. He hears breathing. He hears the small cough of the elderly man. He hears a child murmur and return to sleep. He hears the city above only as a low absence. He has learned to measure a shelter not only by rules but by atmosphere. Tonight the atmosphere is holding. Not perfect. Nothing is perfect. The benches are hard. The air is damp. The night is long. But people are settling. That is what matters. He begins to walk back. His shoes touch the floor carefully. A lamp in his hand, lowered so it does not shine into faces. As he passes Margaret, he sees Peter asleep and Margaret awake. She looks tired, but not distressed. He stops only long enough to whisper that there is more hot water farther down if she needs it. She thanks him softly. He nods and moves on. The offer itself warms her, even if she does not need it yet. To know that something is available can be almost as comforting as taking it. Hot water, another blanket, a little help on the stairs, a person walking the length of the room to check that all remains well. Small assurances gather in the shelter like warmth. Peter's weight against Margaret has made her arms stiff. At last, very slowly, she begins to adjust him. She moves the pillow first, sliding it closer to the wall. Then she supports his head with one hand and shifts her coat under his cheek. He frowns in his sleep but does not wake. She guides him gently down until he is leaning against the pillow rather than against her arm. The whole movement takes longer than it would in daylight. At night, among sleepers, every motion must become soft. When she is done, Peter lies curled beside her on the bench, his knees bent, the blanket over him, one hand near his face. Margaret watches to make sure the breathing remains deep. It does. She flexes her fingers slowly. The arm aches, but the ache begins to fade. She leans back against the brick. For the first time that night, she allows her own eyes to close. Not fully, not for long, only to rest them. Behind her eyelids, she can still see the lamp's amber circle. She can hear the rain above. She can hear Peter breathing. She can hear a page turn somewhere. She can hear the shelter existing. It is not the same as sleeping in a bed at home. The bench is too hard. The air is too public. The light is too uneven. But tiredness is forgiving. Tiredness accepts what is offered. And for a few minutes, Margaret lets herself be carried by the room. At home, before coming down, she had folded the kitchen cloth over the back of a chair, checked the stove, covered the window, closed the cupboard, and looked once around the room as if memorizing it. Now those images return. A kitchen table, a teapot, a chair, a darkened window, Peter's toy left near the hearth, a row of cups on a shelf. The ordinary things of home, waiting above in the dark. She does not hold the images tightly, she lets them pass. The shelter is the room she has now, the bench beneath her, the child beside her, the lamp ahead, the rain above. This is enough for tonight. The elderly woman with the basket opens her eyes and looks down at her hands. For a moment she does not remember why she has gloves on. Then the shelter returns around her. She lifts the cloth in the basket and checks the contents. Everything is still there. She lowers the cloth. Her husband sleeps now, his head tilted slightly to one side. She adjusts his scarf, though he does not wake. Then she looks across at Margaret and Peter. She smiles faintly. Margaret's eyes are closed, so she does not see. The older woman rests her hands on the basket again. She has done what she needed to do. She closes her eyes. A distant train moves somewhere below or beyond the shelter. Its vibration felt more than heard. London has layers. Streets. Cellars. Tunnels. Rails. Pipes. Rooms. Shelters. Lives above lives. Sounds beneath sounds. The train passes slowly. Or perhaps it is not a train at all, but some other deep city movement. No one in the shelter reacts. The vibration becomes part of the night, a low, brief reminder that the city continues around them in hidden ways. Then it fades. Rain remains, breath remains, the lamps remain. The shelter seems to descend further into calm. A boy farther down wakes and asks for water. His mother gives him a mug. He drinks with both hands and lies back down. A man changes position on a bench and mutters an apology to no one in particular. A woman opens a tin, removes one mint and closes it carefully before the sound can become too sharp. The warden speaks softly with someone near the steps. The young clerk's book slides slightly on his lap. He catches it without opening his eyes. All these small movements are absorbed by the room. Nothing breaks the calm. Nothing rises above the shared agreement of quiet. Margaret opens her eyes again. She has not slept, not exactly, but the brief rest has softened her. She checks Peter, still asleep. She checks the bag with one hand, still close. She checks the blanket, still covering him. The mind of a mother moves through these checks without effort. Child, bag, blanket, light, door, child again. The circle is familiar. It keeps her grounded. She allows herself a sip from the thermos, pouring carefully so the liquid makes only a small sound. The tea is weaker now but still warm enough. She drinks slowly. The warmth moves into her chest. The shelter becomes a little easier. Across from her, the knitting woman has opened her eyes too. She takes the grey wool out again, but does not resume working. She only holds it in her lap. Perhaps her hands are too tired. Perhaps the wool itself is comforting, soft, familiar, useful. She looks at it as one might look at a small animal asleep. Then she tucks it back into the bag. Some tasks can wait until morning. Morning itself feels far away, yet less impossible than before. The first stretch of the night had been full of arrival. The middle has become stillness. Later there will be the slow stirring of departure. But now the shelter floats between the two. People are neither arriving nor leaving. They are simply there, held below the city. The lamps burn low. The air grows warmer near the benches and cooler near the floor. A few people have wrapped scarves around their feet. A child's shoe has fallen and lies sideways near a bag. A man's hat rests over his eyes. A woman's hand remains on a pram handle even though the baby inside is asleep. The world has become hands holding things. A mug, a blanket, a basket, a book, a child, a strap of a bag, a pencil, a knitting needle, a folded letter. Hands hold what they can, and sleep comes when they begin to loosen. One by one, fingers relax. A mug is placed down. A book closes. A pencil stops. A blanket is trusted to stay in place. The body learns that it may release a little. The shelter will not be comfortable exactly, but it will be steady. Steady is enough. Above, the rain begins to lighten. It does not stop. It simply becomes finer. The hard tapping on gutters changes into a softer patter. Water still runs in the street, but with less urgency. The city's wet surfaces shine in darkness. On a windowsill, drops gather and fall one at a time. On a rooftop, rain moves along slate and finds the edge. In an alley, a barrel collects water. Near the shelter entrance, the steps glisten. The hooded lamp continues to glow, faint and patient. A late pedestrian, hurrying home or toward another shelter, passes the entrance without looking down. The sound of their footsteps reaches only the upper steps, then disappears. Below, no one hears. The people underground are deep inside their own weather. The shelter's weather is breath and warm wool. Margaret's thoughts drift toward the morning without fully entering it. There will be the climb up the steps, the damp street, the walk home, the kettle, the window coverings, the small routines that make a day begin. But she lets morning remain vague. To think too clearly about morning would make the bench harder and the night longer. Better to remain in the present shelter hour. Peter asleep, tea warm, rain gentle, lamp low, the warden nearby, the brick wall at her back, the blanket over her lap, the old city above, the quiet room below. A low whisper travels along the shelter as one person asks another for the time. The answer comes back softly. It is later than some had thought, earlier than others had hoped. Time underground has a strange quality. Without windows, without sky, without the ordinary signals of night, people measure it by lamps, by tiredness, by the cooling of tea, by children's sleep, by the warden's rounds, by the ache in a shoulder, by the number of times one has shifted on a bench. Clock time is useful, but body time is stronger. The body knows the night by weight. The shelter knows it by quiet. Peter turns in sleep so that his face is half hidden by the pillow. Margaret adjusts the blanket near his neck. He makes no sound. His sleep has deepened. Children can sometimes sleep anywhere once the first resistance passes. The bench, the brick, the murmur, the lamps, the rain, all become part of the background. His hand opens. A biscuit crumb falls from his sleeve onto the blanket. Margaret notices and brushes it away gently. The crumb disappears into the folds. A tiny, ordinary thing. A motherly thing. A sleep thing. The warden rests for a moment near a pillar. Not sitting. Only leaning one shoulder against the cool brick. He looks along the shelter and lets his eyes soften. He must remain attentive, but attentiveness does not always need sharpness. It can be wide and quiet. He sees the whole room at once. No one standing where they should not. No lamp smoking too much. No child wandering. No one distressed. A calm room. A held room. He takes out his notebook, then changes his mind. No note is needed. Not every good thing needs to be written. He slips the notebook back into his pocket. Further down, the young woman with the letter has fallen asleep with the folded paper still in her hand. A neighbour beside her notices after a while and gently takes the letter, placing it into the young woman's bag where it will not fall. The young woman does not wake. The neighbour returns to her own blanket. This is the shelter's quiet economy of care. A letter saved, a blanket raised, a child shifted, a mug moved away from an edge, a bag tucked beneath a bench, a lamp lowered. No one announces these kindnesses. They happen because people are close enough to notice. In the shelter, closeness can be difficult. Too many bodies, too little space, damp coats, hard benches, shared air. But closeness also allows care to travel quickly. A hand reaches, a nod answers, a space is made, a cup is passed. The room becomes not private but communal. And sometimes, communal quiet has its own comfort. You may imagine this now, softly. A long underground room, rows of benches, warm lamps, damp coats. People asleep in small arrangements. A boy curled under a blanket, a mother resting her eyes, a warden walking slowly, a thermos tucked into a bag, a book with a worn cover, rain above, brick around, the old city holding still. You do not need to keep watch here. Others are keeping it. You do not need to climb the stairs. Not yet. You do not need to know the time. Only feel the low rhythm of the place. Breathing, rain, lamp hum, a page, a coat, a soft cough, breathing again. The shelter's middle hour continues. The lamps seem dimmer now, though perhaps the eyes are only tired. Light in a shelter at night is not meant to wake people fully. It is meant to keep darkness gentle. It lets a person find a mug, a bag, a handkerchief, a child's scarf. It lets the warden see the walkway. It lets the brick walls remain visible enough to feel real. But it does not insist on attention. It gives permission for eyelids to lower. Amber light is kind that way. It does not command. It invites. Margaret's eyes close again. This time she drifts closer to sleep. Not fully. A part of her remains aware of Peter, of the bench, of the bag near her feet. But another part loosens. She sees in the soft darkness behind her eyes the kitchen at home, then the shelter lamp, then rain on the window, then Peter as a much smaller child asleep in a pram, then the shelter again. Memory and present mix gently. The mind, when tired, does not arrange things neatly. It lets images float. A teacup, a street, a blanket, a face, a lamp, a door. She lets them float. There is no need to choose. The elderly couple sleep now, both of them, their shoulders almost touching. The basket remains between them like a small guardian. The knitting woman sleeps upright, chin lowered. The clerk's book has finally closed, perhaps by gravity more than decision. The baby sleeps. The boy with the water mug sleeps. The young woman's letter rests safely in her bag. The warden continues his slow circuit. The shelter has entered its deepest quiet. This is the part of the night that belongs most to sleep stories. The place is established. The people are settled. The sounds are known. Nothing new is required. The words can become slower. The images can return. Rain above, lamps below, brick walls, wooden benches, wool blankets, warm mugs, folded letters, soft breathing, rain above, lamps below, brick walls, wooden benches, wool blankets, warm mugs, folded letters, soft breathing. Again and again, the same calm things. Again and again, the night holds. The listener may drift now without missing anything. The story is not moving quickly. It is rocking gently in place, like rain, like breath, like a train far below, like the quiet pulse of a city waiting for morning. A droplet falls from a coat near the entrance and lands in a shallow puddle. The sound is small, a tiny tap. Then another, after a long pause. The coat had been hung there by someone who arrived wet and tired, and now it slowly releases the rain it carried inside. The shelter takes even this into itself. Rain from the street, rain from a sleeve, rain from a hat, rain from the edge of a scarf, all drying slowly in the underground warmth. By morning the coat may still be damp, but less so. Drier, warmer, better, enough. Enough is a word that belongs here too. Enough space on a bench, enough tea in a thermos, enough blanket to cover a child, enough light to see, enough quiet to sleep, enough patience to wait, enough kindness to make room. Not perfect, not easy, but enough. The shelter does not offer luxury, it offers enough, and enough on a long London night can be a blessing. Margaret's hand slips from the book in her lap and comes to rest beside Peter's blanket. Her fingers loosen, her breathing slows. For several minutes she sleeps, lightly, but truly. The warden passes and sees her asleep. He slows his step as he moves by. Peter sleeps beside her. The bag is tucked safely under the bench. All is well. The warden continues. The shelter at night is full of people sleeping lightly, each trusting the room a little more than before. Trust does not arrive immediately. It gathers. From the first warm sip, from the familiar bench, from the warden's steady rounds, from the mother's voice reading, from the rain becoming soft overhead, from the fact that the person beside you has also closed their eyes. Little by little, the room becomes trustworthy enough for sleep. The rain thins further. In the street above, the gutter still runs, but the drops fall less frequently from the roof edges. A faint mist hangs over the pavement. The bicycle at the railing gleams with water. The newspaper at the curb has darkened into a soft shape and no longer looks like news at all. A cat, perhaps the same one from earlier, sits beneath a sheltered step and washes one paw. The city remains blacked out but not empty. Behind curtains, people sleep in chairs, in beds, on floors, in shelters, in stations, in rooms made temporary by the needs of the time. Some are above ground, some are below. All are inside the same night. The shelter is one small chamber of that larger sleeping city. Below, a child laughs once in a dream and then grows quiet. The sound is so small that only two people nearby hear it. One smiles without opening her eyes. Another shifts and settles. Dreams in a shelter are shared only by accident. A sound escapes, a word, a laugh, a murmur. Then the dream returns to its owner. Peter dreams now of something that makes his fingers curl lightly into the blanket. Perhaps a toy, perhaps a dog, perhaps a sunny morning far from the shelter, perhaps nothing that can be named. His mother sleeps beside him, unaware for the moment, and still her hand remains near enough that if he moved suddenly, she would feel it. The body keeps its own watch. The warden's lamp moves once more along the shelter, slower than before. He is tired too. Everyone is tired. His shoulders ache from the weight of the night, though not dramatically. It is only the ordinary ache of staying responsible while others rest. He does not resent it. This is his work, and there is comfort in work that can be done quietly. He checks the entrance, he checks the lamps, he checks the walkway, he checks the far corner, he checks the old woman's basket is not blocking the path. He checks that the child's shoe has not moved too far into the aisle. He nudges it gently back under the bench with the side of his foot. The child sleeps on. A good check is one that changes almost nothing. The shelter continues. A man near the entrance wakes and asks in a whisper whether the rain has stopped. The warden listens and says, "Nearly." The man nods. Nearly is enough information. He closes his eyes again. Nearly stopped. Nearly morning, nearly dry. Nearly rested. The night is full of nearly, and nearly can be soothing when nothing needs to be exact. Margaret wakes from her brief sleep not with a start, but with a slow return. First she feels the bench, then the blanket on her lap, then Peter beside her, then the shelter's light, then the sound of rain, softer now. She does not move immediately. She lets the world assemble itself. Peter is still asleep. The bag is still there. The book is still in her lap. She had slept. Only a little, but enough. She feels the difference in her face, in her eyes, in the slight loosening of her thoughts. She takes a careful breath. The shelter feels calmer than when she last looked. More people asleep, fewer whispers. The lamps lower in mood, if not in brightness. She looks across and sees the knitting woman asleep. The grey wool bag rests beside her. The elderly couple asleep. The clerk asleep. The young woman asleep. A whole row of strangers held in shared dimness. Margaret feels a quiet tenderness toward them, though she knows little about them. Sleeping people are difficult to fear. They become simple again, breathing, resting, trusting the hour. The shelter, for all its discomfort, has made them into a temporary household. She pours a last small amount of tea into her mug. It is barely warm now, she drinks it anyway. The taste is weak, metallic from the thermos, and deeply familiar. A night taste, a shelter taste. A taste she may remember years later without wanting to, or perhaps with tenderness. Memory is not always obedient. It keeps the small things. The smell of damp wool, the sound of rain overhead, the feel of a child's weight against the arm, the glow of a lamp on brick, the final sip of lukewarm tea. The warden sits briefly at the far end of the shelter where a chair has been placed for him. He does not remove his coat. He only sits, takes out his notebook, and rests it closed on his knee. For a few moments he allows himself to be still. The room is calm. He has earned stillness. His lamp rests on the floor beside him, making a circle around his shoes. He looks down at the light. Dust moves through it slowly. Tiny particles, almost invisible, floating, falling, rising with air currents made by breathing and warmth. He watches them for a few seconds. Then he looks up again. A good warden does not disappear too deeply into his own tiredness, but he can rest at the edge of it. The shelter remains calm. The rain becomes a mist above. The first faint change toward morning has not yet reached the underground room, but it has begun somewhere in the city. Perhaps in the sky behind clouds, perhaps along the river, perhaps in the mind of the baker who will soon rise, perhaps in the railway worker already awake, perhaps in the milkman checking harness and cart. Morning begins in many places before light reaches the windows. In the shelter, it begins as a small shift in breathing. One person wakes and decides to sleep a little more. Another turns over. A mother opens her eyes, checks her child, and closes them again. The night has not ended, but it has softened. Its hardest part is behind them. For now, the shelter holds the final deep quiet before people begin to stir. This is the gentlest part to rest in. not arrival, not departure, only the held middle giving way, slowly, to the possibility of dawn. You can stay here too, not needing to leave, not needing to wake, only resting with the image of the shelter beneath London. Rain almost stopped above, low lamps below, rows of sleeping people, a child under a blanket, a mother with a book, a warden resting near his lamp, a thermos nearly empty, a letter safe in a bag, a pair of knitting needles tucked away, a city dark and wet overhead, a room breathing softly below. Let the image become simpler. Lamp, rain, blanket, breath. Lamp, rain, blanket, breath. Nothing more is needed right now. The story will continue, but it will not hurry. The night will pass, but it will not push. The people will wake when morning asks them to. For now, they sleep where they can, safe enough, warm enough, quiet enough, held beneath the city by brick, by patience, and by the small, steady kindness of those who keep the lamps low. The shelter remains in its deepest part of the night. Not the first hour, when everyone is still arranging themselves, still opening bags, still deciding where to sit, still making the public space feel almost private. And not yet the hour before morning, when blankets are folded, coats are buttoned, and people begin to think about the stairs, the wet street, and the rooms waiting above. This is the hour between. The hour when the lamps have burned long enough for their glow to feel familiar. The hour when the benches are no longer only benches but temporary beds. The hour when each person has found some small way to belong to the room. A folded coat under the head, a bag beneath the feet, a scarf wrapped twice around the neck, a hand resting on a child's shoulder, a book closed over one finger, a thermos tucked carefully against the wall, a blanket pulled high enough to cover the chest. The shelter, at this hour, is not comfortable in any easy way. The air is close, the floor is hard, the brick is cool behind the back, the wooden benches press against shoulders and hips. But the mind has begun to accept these things, and when the mind accepts them, they become less sharp. The bench becomes only the place where the body rests. The brick becomes only the wall that holds the room. The damp air becomes only the shared weather of the shelter. The low lamps become only small moons beneath the city. Margaret watches the shelter without fully looking at it. Her eyes are open, but soft. Peter sleeps beside her, one cheek resting against the pillow, one hand half open on the blanket. The empty mug is tucked safely in the bag now. The book is closed. The thermos is nearly empty. The sandwich is still wrapped, saved for later, or perhaps for morning, or perhaps only because food feels more reassuring when it has not yet been used. Margaret lets her fingers rest against the edge of the bag. The rough fabric is familiar. At home, the bag hangs behind the kitchen door. Here, it has become a small cupboard, a small table, a small anchor. It holds the pieces of home that could be carried below the street. A scarf, a book, a thermos, a tin, a folded cloth, a pencil Peter had insisted on bringing, though he has not used it tonight. Small things, but small things can make a strange place softer. Across the aisle, the woman with the knitting opens her eyes again. She does not move at first. She seems to listen to the room before deciding whether to be awake. Then her hand slips quietly into the cloth bag at her side. She touches the wool, feels it, and withdraws her hand. She does not knit. Not now. The touch alone is enough. A person may be comforted by the presence of work without doing it. The wool waits, the needles wait. Morning will come, another row will be made. For now, the unfinished garment rests in darkness with everyone else. Near the far wall, the young clerk has fallen into a light and uneasy sleep. His head tips forward. Then his body corrects itself slightly. Then stillness returns. The book on his lap rises and falls with his breathing. One page has bent under his thumb. He will notice the crease later and perhaps be annoyed, but not much. In the shelter, paper suffers a little. Books soften, letters bend. Newspapers lose their crispness. Ration books curl at the corners. Everything absorbs dampness. Everything becomes less sharp. Even printed words seem quieter here. The warden passes again, but more slowly now. He has already checked the main things. The lamps are steady. The entrance is clear. The people are settled. There is nothing dramatic to do, and so his work becomes the quiet work of presence. He walks because walking tells the room that someone is awake. He looks because looking tells him that the calm is holding. He listens because listening is sometimes the most useful thing a person can do at night. He hears the shelter as a whole, not individual sounds first, but one combined sound. The low breath of many people, the distant rain, the faint settling of wood and brick, the occasional cough, the quiet shift of a blanket, the soft clink of a mug placed carefully under a bench. A room of people trying to sleep has its own weather. He knows this weather now. Tonight it is gentle, a little damp, a little tired, but gentle. At the entrance, the wet steps reflect a weak amber glow from the lamp. Rainwater has gathered in shallow lines along the edge of each step. No one is coming down now. No one is going up. The entrance is only an opening into darkness above. Beyond it, the street lies quiet with rain on the pavement and blacked out windows along the houses. But from below, the street feels almost imaginary, a place remembered rather than seen. The shelter has become the real world. The benches, the lamps, the bags, the breathing, the brick. These are what matter now. Margaret leans her head back against the wall. The brick is cool through the collar of her coat. She does not mind. The coolness helps keep her awake enough. She thinks of the kitchen above, but the thought is not sharp. The kettle, the chair, the covered window, the little shelf where the cups stand, the damp cloth she left folded near the sink. The room will be there when they return. She tells herself this gently. The room will be there, the kettle will be there, the chair will be there, the shelf will be there. The thought becomes rhythmic. The mind sometimes comforts itself by naming what remains. Peter shifts slightly and Margaret's attention returns at once. His blanket has slipped near one shoulder. She lifts it, only an inch or two. Enough. He does not wake. She leaves her hand there for a while, resting on the wool. The blanket is rough, but warm from his body. This warmth is one of the deepest comforts in the room. Not the heat of a stove, not the steam of tea, not the glow of a lamp, the warmth of a sleeping child under a blanket. Margaret closes her eyes for another brief moment. The rain above has become fine and even. It is more like a texture than a sound now, a soft veil over London. It falls on the roofs of shops, on terraces, on small gardens, on the river, on railway arches, on stone steps, on iron gates, on the tops of buses parked for the night, on the dark shoulders of men walking home, on the covered windows of bedrooms, on the entrance of the shelter. The rain connects all of these places for a while. Above and below, every person is inside the same weather, but below, the weather is gentler. It arrives through brick, through distance, through memory. A mother farther along the bench begins to hum under her breath. Not a song with clear words, only a slow, almost absent-minded melody, barely louder than breathing. She hums because the baby in her arms has begun to stir. The sound is soft enough that it does not disturb anyone. It folds into the rain and the lamps and the low room. The baby settles. The humming continues for a little while after it is needed, perhaps because the mother needs it too. Then it fades. No one comments. In a shelter, one person's small comfort often becomes part of everyone's atmosphere. The humming leaves behind a softness. The young woman whose letter was placed safely in her bag wakes for a moment and reaches for it, not finding it in her hand. Her face tightens with brief concern. Then her fingers find the folded paper in the bag. She relaxes. She does not know who moved it. She looks around, but most people near her are asleep. After a moment, she accepts the kindness without needing to identify it. She tucks the letter deeper inside. Then she closes her eyes again. Some kindnesses are like that. Received without a name. Remembered only as the feeling that something precious was not lost. The warden sees this from a distance and understands enough. He does not say anything. He moves on. A child on the opposite bench has managed to turn sideways, taking up more space than before. His older sister, half asleep beside him, gently pushes his knees back under the blanket. He resists in sleep, then gives in. The blanket settles. The sister's eyes never fully open. She has done the adjustment by instinct. Bodies learn to share space in crowded nights. A shoulder moves, a knee folds, a foot returns under the bench, a blanket is pulled in. People become aware of one another even while nearly asleep. The shelter teaches this awareness patiently. Margaret's thoughts drift again, this time not to home, but to the street in daylight, the grocer's window, the woman at the corner who always sweeps her step, the boy who delivers papers, The smell of bread when there is bread, the sound of carts, the voices of neighbours. How ordinary the street can be in the morning, how different it feels now from beneath the ground. She does not think of this sadly, only with the strange tenderness that comes when familiar places are imagined from far away, even if they are only a few steps overhead. The shelter makes everything above feel distant, even home, even the street, even the sky. Peter breathes out slowly and sinks deeper into the pillow. Margaret opens her eyes. The lamp across the aisle has a little halo around it, perhaps from damp air, perhaps from her own tiredness. The halo makes the brick wall glow softly. For a moment, the whole shelter looks like an old painting in amber and brown. Coats, blankets, faces half hidden, hands folded, a basket, a book, a child asleep. The image is so still that she feels she might remember it forever. But she also knows memory changes. It may keep only the lamp, or only Peter's breathing, or only the smell of tea and wool. That would be enough. The old man of the elderly couple wakes and adjusts his scarf. His wife opens one eye without moving her head. He whispers that he is all right. She nods and closes her eye again. He remains awake for a few minutes looking down at his hands. They are large hands, old hands, hands marked by work. In the low shelter light they seem almost carved. He flexes his fingers, slowly as if counting them. Then he places them back on his knees and lets the room's rhythm take him again. Sleep comes more slowly to the old than to children, but it comes, sometimes, through patience. He waits for it without chasing. The warden reaches the end of the shelter where the air is slightly cooler. There, the brick feels damper. A small draught moves near a vent. Someone has placed a folded coat against the wall to block the cold. It helps a little, not completely, enough. The warden adjusts the coat so it covers the gap better. A woman nearby thanks him in a whisper. He nods. Another small improvement. A little less cold, a little less draught, a little more sleep. The shelter is full of these tiny repairs to discomfort. No one can make it perfect, but many people can make it slightly better. Slightly better is the architecture of endurance. A better fold in a blanket, a better angle of a lamp, a better place for a bag, a better position for a sleeping child's head, a better knot in a scarf, a better seal against a draft. Small corrections made kindly, over and over. The rain thins for a while, then returns. Not strongly. Only enough to remind the city that night has not yet finished. On the street above, water runs along the curb and carries the softened newspaper a few inches farther before it catches on a stone. A drop falls from a shop sign, another from a window ledge. The wet bicycle remains by the railing. Its tyres shine, its bell holds a bead of water. The cat that passed earlier has found shelter under a step, curled into itself, tail over paws. London is not empty. It is simply quiet in many different ways. There is the quiet of rooms with sleeping families, the quiet of kitchens waiting for kettles, the quiet of streets after rain, the quiet of underground benches, the quiet of a child's dream, the quiet of a warden walking, the quiet of a mother not moving because her child is asleep. The shelter gathers these quiets and makes them one. Margaret's arm is free now, but she still does not move much. Her own tiredness has become heavy and soft. If she were at home, she would be asleep already. Here, she remains lightly awake because public sleep is not the same as private sleep. At home, one can surrender fully. Here, surrender is partial. One sleeps with a hand on the bag, an ear open for the child, a sense of the bench edge and the stranger nearby. Still, even partial sleep is rest. Even a few minutes with the eyes closed can smooth the mind. Even a leaning doze can make the next hour easier. She lets her eyes close again. This time she hears the shelter as if from farther away. The rain becomes lower, the breathing becomes wider, the bench beneath her becomes less distinct. She does not dream, not yet. She only floats near sleep. The warden passes and sees her eyes closed. Peter asleep, the bag safe. He moves more softly. Near the entrance, the man with the cap over his eyes begins to snore. Not loudly, but enough that the woman beside him opens one eye. She waits. The snore catches and stops. She closes her eye again. The man breathes normally. The shelter accepts this too. It has accepted coughs, murmurs, sighs, whispers, the shifting of shoes, the creak of wood, the scratch of a pencil, the tap of rain from coats. A room where people's sleep cannot be perfectly quiet. It can only be forgiving. The shelter is forgiving tonight. Peter dreams again, this time perhaps of the book his mother read, though the story inside it has become mixed with the shelter itself. A hallway becomes a tunnel, a lamp becomes a moon, a bench becomes a bed, a warden becomes a man carrying a lantern through a fairy tale passage. The dream has no fear in it, only dimness, warmth, and the sense of being near his mother. Children transform places quickly in dreams. The hard bench becomes softer. The brick wall becomes the side of a house. The rain above becomes rain on a bedroom window. The shelter enters him gently. The young clerk wakes and finally gives up trying to sleep upright. He folds his coat more carefully, places it between his shoulder and the wall and leans into it. The adjustment is simple, but effective. His face relaxes. His book remains in the satchel now. No more pretending to read. He accepts the need for rest. This is another small surrender. A person stops performing wakefulness, stops pretending the body does not need comfort, finds a better angle, closes the eyes, lets the room hold him. The woman with the knitting now sleeps with her hand still inside the cloth bag, fingers touching the wool. The image is peaceful, a hand resting on unfinished work. The work will continue later. For now, hand and wool both rest. The elderly woman's basket has slid slightly, and Margaret, half awake, notices it. Without thinking much, she reaches across with her foot and nudges it back toward the woman's knees so it will not fall. The woman does not wake. Margaret opens her eyes fully for a moment, sees that the basket is secure and settles back. She has become part of the shelter's quiet care without meaning to. A kindness received, a kindness given. The room circulates care the way it circulates warmth, slowly, unevenly. Enough. The shelter's air is thick with sleep now, the kind of air that makes lamps look softer, the kind that slows thoughts, the kind that makes whispered words seem unnecessary. The warden stops near the centre and listens. The room has shifted again, more asleep than awake now. He can feel the difference. A room of awake people has edges, a room of sleeping people has waves. Breathing rises and falls in many rhythms, some deep, some shallow, some irregular. Together, they make a low human tide. The warden stands in that tide for a moment, allowing himself to be soothed by the very people he is watching over. Then he resumes walking. He knows not to become too comfortable, but he also knows calm when he hears it. The rain above begins to fade again. This time it may truly be ending. A soft drip remains in the gutter. A few drops from roofs, a wet shine on the road. The city holds the rain after the rain has stopped. In the shelter, the change is almost imperceptible. The continuous murmur becomes less continuous. Other sounds appear in the space left behind. A bench creak, a breath, a page settling, a soft footstep. The lamps seem slightly louder, though of course they are not. Margaret opens her eyes once more. She has been asleep for perhaps 5 minutes, perhaps 15. Time has become uncertain. Peter is still asleep. Good. The room is still calm. Good. The bag is still near her feet. Good. She thinks these things with the simplicity of someone waking in a place not quite home. Good. 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 The shelter gives her back the night one detail at a time. The brick wall, the bench, the lamp, the child, the bag. The rain nearly stopped. A woman near the far end whispers that she thinks it is letting up. Another whispers back that it sounds like it. Then silence. Even weather reports are quiet here. No one wants to break the deep rest that has finally settled over the room. The warden hears them and says nothing. People like to know about the rain. Rain is safe to discuss. Rain belongs to everyone. Rain gives the mind something gentle to hold. Peter's hand moves under the blanket. His fingers close around nothing, then open again. Margaret watches the movement fade. She remembers him as a much smaller child, sleeping in a cot with his hand open the same way. The memory arrives with a tenderness almost too large for the shelter. She lets it soften, not deepen. The present is enough. The child here, this hand, this blanket, this night. She does not need to follow the memory farther. A man down the shelter takes a small tin from his pocket and opens it with extreme care. Inside are mints or lozenges. He takes one and offers another silently to the woman beside him. She shakes her head. He closes the tin slowly. The tiny metal sound is still audible, but gentle. He places the lozenge in his mouth and leans back. Small comforts, rationed. A sweet taste in the dark. A way to soothe the throat after damp air. Another object returns to a pocket. Another little ritual complete. The shelter is built not only from brick and benches but from rituals. Pouring tea, opening tins, folding scarves, checking bags, reading a page, walking rounds, adjusting blankets, touching letters, sharing mints, lowering voices. Each ritual says the same thing. We are here, we know what to do. The night can be managed in small ways. Margaret pours the last few drops from the thermos into her mug. It is not enough for a full drink, only a mouthful. She considers saving it, then drinks. The tea is lukewarm and faint. The thermos is empty. She closes it anyway. An empty thermos must still be closed. A habit of order. She places it upright in the bag. The bag settles against her shoe. Peter sleeps on. The woman with the knitting wakes again, perhaps sensing the rain's absence. She looks toward the entrance, though it cannot be seen from her place. Then she looks at Margaret. They exchange another small expression. Nearly morning, perhaps, or perhaps only, still here. The shelter language is mostly made of glances. Glances over sleeping children, glances toward lamps, glances at the warden, glances asking whether a seat is free, glances offering half a bench, glances saying thank you. At night, when voices are lowered, eyes do more work. The warden, too, reads the shelter by glances. A worried glance gets a pause, a tired glance gets a nod, a confused glance gets directions, a grateful glance gets no display, only a continuation of the work. He has learned to speak gently without saying much. That is one of the arts of caretaking in a long room where people need rest. A whisper can be more reassuring than a speech. A lamp placed well can be more helpful than advice. A blanket found at the right time can quiet a fear before it grows. At the far end, a boy who is not Peter wakes and cannot remember where his shoes are. His mother points under the bench. He looks, finds them, and relaxes. He does not put them on, not yet. He only needed to know they were there. Children often sleep better when important objects are accounted for. Shoes, bag, mother, blanket, all present. He lies down again. Margaret notices and understands. Adults are not so different. She knows where the bag is, where the thermos is, where the key is, where Peter is, all present. The body can rest. The long underground room seems warmer now, though perhaps this is only the warmth of many sleeping bodies held together for hours. The damp chill has retreated from the benches. The air near the floor is still cold, but less important. Scarves and coats have become nests. The shelter has turned discomfort into a kind of shared endurance. No one would choose it as a bedroom, but tonight it has done the work of one. It has kept people from the rain. It has given them a place to sit. It has held their sleep, however lightly. It has made room for tea, stories, letters, knitting, and quiet. That is no small thing. The story lingers here because this is the heart of the video. Not the descent into the shelter, not the return home, but the holding. The long, patient holding of ordinary people through a difficult night. The soft light on brick. The warmth of tea. The weight of wool. The small acts of care. The way a public place becomes intimate after midnight. The way strangers become a temporary household. The way rain above becomes a lullaby below. The way sleep comes even where comfort is incomplete. A woman near the entrance begins to pray silently. Her lips move, but no sound comes. Her hands are folded around a handkerchief. The prayer is private. The shelter does not need to know its words. It only receives the stillness of it. After a while, her lips stop moving. Her head lowers. Perhaps the prayer has ended. Perhaps it has become sleep. The difference is not important to the room. Both are forms of letting go. The warden's lamp passes over the floor again. The light catches the edge of the mitten he returned earlier, now tucked into a child's pocket. It catches the closed book in the clerk's satchel. It catches the handle of Margaret's thermos. It catches the knitting bag. It catches the old woman's basket. All the small vessels of the night. Bags holding objects, blankets holding bodies, hands holding warmth, the shelter holding everyone. The lamp moves on. A low rumble from somewhere in the city passes through the ground. It is distant and undefined. The people in the shelter are used to distant city sounds. No one wakes fully. The rumble fades. The rainless quiet returns. In this story, all distant sounds remain distant. They do not grow. They do not arrive. They only remind the listener that the city is large and the shelter is small, and small can feel safe when held gently. Peter sighs. Margaret looks down. His face is calm. She lets herself smile. Only a little. She's too tired for more. The smile fades into rest. She closes her eyes again. The shelter continues. A few more minutes pass, though minutes are soft here. Then more. The long middle stretches, but not unpleasantly now. It is less like waiting and more like floating. No one is fully comfortable, but many are resting. No one is fully private, but many are peaceful. No one has everything they would want, but most have enough. Enough. Again the word settles. Enough for this breath. Enough for this bench. Enough for this child. Enough for this hour. Enough for sleep to come a little closer. For the listener, the images may begin to blur. That is all right. Let them blur. Let Margaret and Peter become simply a mother and child under a blanket. Let the warden become simply a quiet lamp moving slowly. Let the shelter become simply a warm underground room. Let London become simply rain above brick. Let the story become only rhythm. Lamp, rain, breath, wool, brick, tea, lamp, rain, breath, wool, brick, tea. The same soft things returning. Nothing to solve, nothing to fear, nothing to follow too closely. Only the shelter holding its people through the long middle of the night. The warden reaches the centre again and pauses. The room is so calm now that even his pause feels part of it. He looks toward the entrance. Listens. No new footsteps. He looks toward the far end. Stillness. He looks at the lamps. Steady. He looks at the people. Sleeping. Resting. Waiting gently. He lets himself take one deeper breath. The air smells of damp wool, tea, brick, dust, paper, and people. It is not fresh, but it is human. It is the smell of a shared night. He will remember it later, perhaps. Or perhaps he will not. Some nights blur together when one has kept many of them, but this one in the story remains. Soft rain, low lamps, a sleeping child, a mother resting, a letter saved, a mitten returned, a basket held, a book closed, a city above, a shelter below. The room continues to breathe. Margaret's head tilts slightly as she drifts again. Peter's hand opens on the blanket. The old woman's basket stays steady. The young clerk finally sleeps more deeply. The knitting woman's fingers relax. The baby does not stir. The warden moves on. And the rain, almost finished above London, becomes so soft that it is no longer heard as rain, only as the memory of rain held in the walls, in coats, in the damp shine of the floor, and in the quiet minds of those who have spent the night beneath the city. There is still more night to pass. Morning is not here yet. But the hardest part of settling has ended. The shelter has become a sleeping place. The people have become a sleeping household. The lamps have become stars under the ground. And the long London night continues slowly, kindly, with nothing sudden, nothing sharp, only the patient breath of those resting together while the city waits above them in the dark. A little deeper into the shelter's long middle, the night seems to loosen its grip on ordinary time. The clocks still exist. The warden still has his watch. A few people still know roughly how late it is, and a few others have asked in whispers, then forgotten the answer almost immediately. But for most of those resting underground, time has become less like numbers and more like weight. The weight of the blanket, the weight of a child leaning against a parent, the weight of the head when it finally finds the coat folded beneath it, the weight of tired hands after holding a book too long, the weight of warm air beneath the low ceiling, the weight of rainwater held in coats and hats near the entrance, the weight of the city above, dark and wet and silent. Margaret's sleep remains light, but it comes now in small pieces. She drifts for a few minutes, then returns, drifts again, returns. Each time she returns, the shelter gives itself back to her in the same gentle order. Peter, blanket, bench, lamp, bag, rain. Peter, blanket, bench, lamp, bag, rain. The repetition reassures her. Nothing has moved too far. Nothing has been lost. The child is still beside her, the bag is still under the bench, the lamp still glows, the shelter still holds. And because of that, she can let her eyes close once more. Peter sleeps more deeply now than he did at first. The first part of the night had kept him close to waking, with the excitement of coming down the stairs, the familiar shelter, the tea, the book, the people around him, the sense that bedtime had somehow been moved under the street. But now the room has become part of his sleep. The hard bench no longer matters much. The brick wall is no longer strange. The murmurs around him are not interruptions but background. The low lamps are not something to watch, but a warm blur behind closed eyes. He's inside the shelter's rhythm, a rhythm made of breath, rain, and stillness. A rhythm that says the night may continue without him needing to attend to it. Across the aisle, the knitting woman wakes again, and this time takes the grey wool out of the bag. She does not intend to work for long, perhaps only a few stitches, perhaps only enough to warm her hands and settle her mind. Her needles move with great care. Click, pause, click, pause. The sound is so faint that it almost disappears beneath the breathing of the shelter. She works slowly because speed would feel wrong here. The wool slides over her fingers. The small unfinished piece grows by a row or less. Then she stops. She looks at what she's done, not with pride, not with criticism, only with the quiet acceptance of someone who has moved time forward by a few stitches. She folds the wool away again. The little clicking ceases, but the calm it created remains. A man sitting near the far wall opens his eyes and watches the lamps. He has not slept much. Some people find it hard to sleep in shared rooms, no matter how tired they are. He is not afraid, only wakeful. His thoughts are not loud, but they do not settle easily. He tries different positions, back against the wall, elbows on knees, arms folded, hat over eyes. None of them are truly comfortable. At last, he gives up trying to force sleep and simply watches the light on the bricks. The bricks are old, or at least they look old in the lamplight. Some are darker than others, some have chips along their edges. The mortar lines between them wander slightly, not perfectly straight. A drop of moisture has gathered in one place and catches the lamp's glow. The man follows the line of mortar with his eyes from one brick to the next. Left to right, down, across, up again. The pattern gives his mind something simple to do. Not thinking, not remembering, only following. After a while, his eyes close. The brick pattern remains behind his eyelids, softened into warm lines. He does not know whether he will sleep, but he is closer to it than before. The shelter has many such quiet methods. A person follows the bricks. Another counts the lamps without meaning to. Another listens for the rain. Another feels the edge of a blanket between thumb and finger. Another holds a letter inside a coat pocket. Another watches the warden's lamp move away and return. None of these are formal rituals. No one teaches them. The tired body invents them. Small ways to make waiting bearable. Small ways to ask the mind to release its grip. A mother 2 benches away has arranged 3 children around her like a nest. One lies across her lap. One sleeps against her shoulder. One is curled at her feet, wrapped in a coat that is too large. She sits almost impossibly still. Her own head rests against the wall, but her hands remain lightly placed where each child can be felt. A hand on a back, a hand near a knee, a foot touching the coat at the floor. She sleeps in fragments, but she knows where all of them are. The warden sees her as he passes and lowers his lamp a little more. The sleeping children become only soft shapes under wool and shadow. Nearby, an older girl, perhaps 12 or 13, sits awake beside a younger brother. She's been told to wake her mother if anything is needed, and so she takes the responsibility seriously. Too seriously, perhaps. She watches the room with large, tired eyes. The warden notices and pauses. He whispers that all is quiet. She nods. He adds that she may rest. She glances at her mother, at the children, then back at him. He gives a small, reassuring smile. Not a cheerful smile, only a steady one. She lowers her eyes and leans carefully against the wall. After a little while, she's asleep too. Responsibility, when shared by someone older and calmer, can loosen its hold. The warden moves on. His own responsibility remains, but he carries it as gently as he can. The shelter air is warmer now than when people first arrived. Bodies have given heat to the room. Coats steam faintly near the entrance. A few scarves hang from hooks or from the edges of benches. The smell of damp wool has become part of everything. At first, it was noticeable. Now it is simply the smell of the shelter. Damp wool, tea, brick, dust, paper. Coal smoke brought in from the street. A trace of soap from a child's scarf. A trace of peppermint from a tin opened quietly in the middle of the night. A trace of candle wax from someone's small emergency candle. Unlit but present in a bag. Smells, like sounds, become softer with time. They stop arriving separately and become atmosphere. Margaret wakes again to the feeling that her hand is cold. The rest of her is warm enough wrapped in her coat near Peter, under part of the blanket. But one hand has slipped outside. She brings it back in and folds it under her other arm. The motion wakes her only halfway. She checks Peter, still sleeping. She checks the bag, still there. She hears the knitting woman shift across the aisle. She hears a quiet cough. She hears the rain, much softer now. She lets her eyes close again. There is a skill in not waking completely. A skill learned by parents, by nurses, by watchmen, by anyone who has had to rest while still listening for another person. Margaret has learned it over the years. Rise only as far as needed. Check what must be checked. Return before wakefulness becomes too bright. The shelter helps because it does not change much. It offers the same scene each time. The same lamps, the same brick, the same benches, the same warden, the same sleeping child. A stable room allows a light sleeper to return to sleep more easily. The young woman with the letter dreams of writing. Her fingers move slightly in her sleep as if holding a pencil. In the dream, the paper is larger than real paper, and the lines keep moving away from her. Then, the dream softens. The paper becomes a bedsheet. The pencil becomes a spoon. The shelter lamp becomes morning at a kitchen table. She breathes out and the dream dissolves. The folded letter remains safe in her bag. The message inside it remains unfinished but protected. Not every message needs to be completed before morning. Some words can wait, some feelings can wait, some thoughts become gentler if they are allowed to sleep. At the far end, near the cooler draft, the coat blocking the vent has slipped again. A small stream of cold air moves along the floor. The woman nearest it opens her eyes and pulls her feet closer under her blanket. The warden is not nearby. For a moment she simply watches the coat, deciding whether it is worth moving. Then the man beside her, half asleep, reaches down and pushes it back with one hand. The draft lessens. Neither of them speaks. He returns his hand under his coat and keeps his eyes closed. The room has corrected itself. The warden does not have to do every kindness. The shelter by now has begun to care for itself through the people inside it. A bench creaks, a child sighs, a mug rolls a fraction under a bench and stops against a shoe. The shoe's owner does not wake. The mug remains there, held in place. In the morning, someone will find it and perhaps wonder how it travelled. The night moves objects in tiny ways. A scarf slips, a book closes, a bag leans, a mitten falls, a mug rolls. Then hands restore order, or chance does. Nothing important is lost. The shelter continues to hold its little disorder gently. Above ground, the rain has become so fine that it is almost mist. The street shines in layers of grey and black. Chimneys are invisible against the low clouds. The river, not far away in the larger city, moves under bridges with a slow, oily darkness. In a railway arch, water drips from the stone. In a market street, empty stalls stand folded and silent. In a churchyard, wet leaves cling to the path. In a small back garden, a metal pail catches rain from a roof edge, one drop at a time. No one in the shelter sees these things, but they belong to the same night. A city is not one place. It is many small places held together by weather, darkness, habit, and memory. The shelter is one of those places, a hidden room beneath the city's skin. The warden pauses near Margaret's bench, not to speak, only because the lamp ahead flickers slightly. He watches it. The flame or bulb steadies. No action needed. Margaret's eyes open at his nearness. He whispers, "All right here?" She nods. "Yes." Peter sleeps on. The warden looks at the boy, then at the blanket. He nods once, satisfied, and continues. Margaret feels again the comfort of being checked on without being disturbed. A good night watch is like that. Present, but not intrusive. Awake, but not alarming. The person being watched can rest because the watcher asks for so little. Peter's dream changes again. Now he is walking through the shelter, but the shelter has become longer and warmer, and every lamp is a small sun. He's looking for the book his mother read, but when he finds it, the pages are blank and soft like cloth. He wraps the book around himself like a blanket. Dreams make their own sense. Then even that image fades, and he is simply asleep. The listener does not need to remember the dream. It is only a soft passing shape, like steam from tea, like dust in lamplight, like rain beyond the bricks. The elderly man wakes again, and this time reaches for the basket, perhaps thinking it has moved. His wife's hand rests on it already. He sees this and relaxes. She's asleep, but her hand knows the basket. He gently places his hand over hers. They sit like that in the dimness, both mostly asleep, their hands resting together on the cloth-covered basket. Inside may be bread, or medicine, or papers, or nothing very important. It does not matter. The basket has become a centre for them, a small piece of order between two old bodies on a hard bench. The warden sees their hands and looks away, giving the moment privacy. Privacy in a shelter is rare, but it can be made by not looking too long. That too is a kindness. At the centre of the shelter, the lamps cast overlapping pools of amber light. In one pool, a child's shoe. In another, a folded newspaper. In another, the edge of a blanket. In another, Margaret's bag. Between the pools, shadow. People sleep across both light and shadow. The light does not fully wake them. The shadow does not fully hide them. Everything is held in between. This in-between quality is part of the shelter's softness. Not day, not full night, not home, not street, not public exactly, not private exactly. A middle place, a waiting place, a resting place made by necessity and gentleness. Margaret wakes more fully for a few minutes and takes the book from the bag. She does not open it to read, she only holds it. The cover is familiar under her hand, the worn corner, the softened spine, the slight roughness where the cloth binding has frayed. It has been in their house for years. It has sat on shelves, fallen beside beds, been carried in bags, opened at tables, read in lamplight, and now it has slept under London. Books can become companions because they survive many rooms. This one has followed them into the shelter and will follow them home again. She places it back carefully. Peter will ask for it another night, or perhaps he will not. Either way, it remains. A man near the entrance begins to whisper a story to a child who has woken. The story is not long. It may not even have a proper beginning. Something about a horse, a lane, and a blue door. The child listens with eyes half open. The man speaks slowly, inventing only enough to keep the child calm. His voice is low, rough, and tired. The story has no danger in it. Only a horse walking home step by step through a rainy lane toward a stable with clean straw. The child's eyes close before the horse arrives. The man stops speaking. The horse can continue alone in the child's sleep. The shelter returns to its larger quiet. Margaret heard only fragments, but the image of the horse remains with her. A horse walking through rain. A stable. Clean straw. The mind collects these soft images at night. It places them beside the lamps, the blankets, the tea. They become part of the shelter's dream. Perhaps others heard too. Perhaps each imagined a slightly different lane. The rain above makes such stories easy to believe. The warden reaches the entrance again and listens upward. No footsteps, only the last fine rain. He looks at the wet steps. The water has gathered but not worsened. He makes a mental note to warn people in the morning. Wet steps. Slowly. Use the rail. He has said it many times before and will say it again. Repetition is not a problem when it keeps people safe. He turns back toward the long room. For a moment, from the entrance, the shelter looks almost peaceful enough to be intentional, as if someone had designed this underground place for rest. But of course it is improvised. Hard benches, damp air, too many people. Yet humans have a way of softening places by use. A blanket here, a mug there, a child's pillow, a basket, a book, a lamp moved slightly, a coat folded under a head. The shelter becomes gentle not because it was built gentle, but because people make it so. The warden thinks this only vaguely. He is tired. He does not make philosophy of it. He only sees that the room is calmer now than it was when the first people came down. That is enough. A person down the row begins to breathe with a faint whistle through the nose. Someone else shifts away slightly, then settles. A child murmurs. A mother hums one note and stops. The knitting woman wakes, checks the wool, sleeps again. The old couple remain hand over hand on the basket. The young clerk dreams with his head against his folded coat. The letter rests in the bag, the mitten in the pocket, the mug by the shoe, the thermos in Margaret's bag. Every small object has found a temporary place. The room's inventory is complete enough for sleep. The air at floor level is cool, but the benches hold warmth. The walls remain damp, but the blankets are dry enough. The lamps are low, but the walkway is visible enough. The shelter is imperfect in every way, and yet it is working. This is an important kind of comfort. Not perfection, function. The shelter works. The lamps work. The thermos worked. The blanket works. The warden's quiet rounds work. Margaret's hand on Peter's blanket works. The story works the same way. Not by doing something dramatic, only by returning to soft images until the mind has enough to rest. If you're still awake, let the images return slowly. The brick wall, the low lamp, the wet steps, the sleeping child, the quiet warden, the folded letter, the grey wool, the old basket, the empty thermos, the rain. Again, the brick wall, the low lamp, the wet steps, the sleeping child, the quiet warden, the folded letter, the grey wool, the old basket, the empty thermos, the rain. Each image asks very little. Each one can be released as soon as it appears. You do not need to hold them. The shelter holds them. Margaret's head tilts again. This time she falls into a slightly deeper sleep. Her hand remains near Peter, but not touching. Peter remains curled beneath the blanket. For several minutes, mother and child sleep at the same time. The warden passes and sees it. He slows. The sight pleases him in a quiet way. A mother asleep means she trusts the room enough. A child asleep means the room is gentle enough. He continues. At the far end he pauses and sits again for 1 minute. Only one. His lamp rests beside his shoes. He listens. No questions, no arrivals, no disturbances. Only the shelter breathing. For 1 minute he lets his own eyes close. He does not sleep, but he rests at the edge of it. The breath enters. The breath leaves. He opens his eyes. The room remains. That is all he needed. The night's middle begins to feel thinner now, though morning has not yet come. It is like a dark cloth worn softer by many hands, still covering everything, but less heavy than before. People have passed through the hardest stretch of settling and wakefulness. Those who could sleep are sleeping. Those who cannot sleep have found quiet ways to wait. The lamps continue. The rain fades. The shelter remains warm enough. Enough. The word is everywhere now, not spoken but present. Enough sleep. Enough patience, enough light, enough shelter, enough kindness, enough night behind, enough strength for what remains. The warden rises again. He lifts the lamp. He resumes the round. The small circle of light moves with him, touching the floor, the benches, the bags, the shoes, the edges of blankets. And as it moves, the shelter seems almost to breathe with it. Light passing, breath rising, rain fading, sleep deepening, London above still dark, London below held in amber, nothing sudden, nothing sharp. Only people resting beneath the city, 1 quiet minute at a time, while the long night slowly begins to turn toward morning. There is a point in the deepest part of a long night when the shelter seems almost to forget that it is underground. Not completely. The brick walls are still there, the concrete floor is still there, the benches are still hard. The lamps still hang in their careful line. The entrance steps still lead upward into the wet London dark. But after enough hours, after enough breathing, after enough quiet adjustments of blankets and bags and sleeping children, the shelter becomes less like a place beneath the street and more like a slow, floating room outside of time. A room where people have set aside the day. A room where voices have lowered until they are almost part of the air. A room where the rain above has faded into a memory and the lamps below have become the only stars anyone needs. Margaret sleeps lightly now. Peter sleeps more deeply. The book rests in the bag. The thermos is empty. The blanket is warm across Peter's shoulders. Margaret's hand lies near the edge of the bench, relaxed, palm turned slightly upward, as if sleep has opened it without asking. Her face in the low light has lost some of the careful attention it carried earlier. For a few minutes she's not watching the bag, not checking the blanket, not listening for the rain. She's simply resting. The shelter has taken the watch from her for a little while. The warden passes and notices this. He does not stop. He only lowers his lamp a little more as he moves by, so the light does not touch her face too sharply. A sleeping mother, a sleeping child, a closed bag beneath a bench. All as it should be. He continues down the aisle. His steps are slow. His lamp moves like a small warm moon along the floor. The old couple are still asleep with their hands close to the basket. The young clerk sleeps with his folded coat between his shoulder and the wall. The knitting woman has finally leaned her head back, her bag held loosely in her lap. The mother with 3 children has managed to close both eyes while still touching each child in some small way. The older girl, who had tried to stay awake, is asleep now too, her head against her mother's sleeve. The man who watched the brick wall has drifted off at last. Even the sleepless have been softened by the room. The shelter is full of small victories no one will celebrate. A child asleep, a worried hand relaxed, a letter not lost, a mitten found, a draft blocked, a lamp kept low, a mother allowed a few minutes of rest. A warden able to walk without being called. Tiny victories. Quiet victories. Victories of patience, not force. Victories made of ordinary care. The warden reaches the far end and pauses beneath one of the lamps. The lamp gives off a faint warmth, though perhaps he imagines it. He looks at the brickwork beside him. There are scratches near the wall, old marks made by bags or benches or hurried shoes. Someone has left a small chalk line on one brick, not readable now, only a pale smudge. A nail has been hammered into a wooden support and bent slightly downward. A piece of string hangs from it, unused. The shelter has accumulated traces of many nights, some visible, most invisible. The memory of voices, the memory of rainwater on coats, the memory of tea steam, the memory of children leaning into sleep, the memory of people looking up toward the entrance and then back down again. Places remember through wear. A smooth place on a bench, a darkened patch near a lamp, a scrape along the wall, a corner where people tend to leave bags, a step worn by many feet. The warden knows these small signs without thinking about them. He knows where a person may stumble, where the floor becomes slick, where the lamp throws too much shadow, where the air is cooler, where people prefer to sit. Knowledge like this is not dramatic. It is built slowly, night after night, through attention. And attention, in a shelter, is another form of kindness. At the entrance, the rain has almost ended completely. Only dripping remains. Water falls from the lip of the stair cover, lands on stone, gathers, slides, falls again. A repeating sound. Slow, uneven, soft enough to belong to sleep. The hooded light near the top of the stairs glows in the wet air. Above it, the street is no longer fully black. A very faint greyness has begun behind the clouds, though no one below would call it morning yet. The city is still mostly hidden from itself. Windows remain covered. Curtains remain drawn. People remain asleep in their chairs, beds, cellars and shelters. But the night has begun, almost secretly, to loosen its hold on the roofs. The warden senses the hour more by habit than by sight. He does not rush. There is still time. The shelter is calmer when morning is allowed to arrive slowly. He returns from the entrance and walks back into the long room. The air changes as he moves away from the steps. Near the entrance, it is cooler and smells more of wet stone. Farther inside, it is warmer and smells of wool, tea, paper, and sleep. The difference is subtle but clear. A person who has spent many nights in such rooms learns the geography of air. Cold near the stairs, warmth near the crowded benches, dampness near the coats, stillness near the far wall, a faint sweetness near the children, where someone opened biscuits earlier, paper and pencil near the young woman's letter, peppermint near the man with the small tin. Every part of the shelter has taken on a little of the people inside it. Margaret dreams now, lightly. In the dream, she is at home, standing in the kitchen, but the kitchen has the shelter's lamps along one wall. The kettle is on the table instead of the stove. Peter's pillow is on a bench by the door. Rain falls somewhere above, though the ceiling is dry. She knows in the dream that she must pour tea, but the cup keeps moving farther away. Then the dream softens and loses its shape. The kitchen becomes warm darkness. The cup becomes only warmth. The rain becomes only sound. She does not wake. Her body has taken what rest it can. Peter's dreams are deeper and less tied to the shelter now. He is somewhere else entirely. Perhaps a garden, perhaps a train, perhaps a room made of the book's half-remembered story. Children travel more freely in sleep. The shelter cannot hold his imagination for long. It gives his body a place to rest, and the mind goes where it wishes. His hand opens on the blanket. His breath slows. Margaret, still asleep, shifts slightly closer to him. The movement is small. A mother's body seeking the child even in sleep. The warden sees this and passes without pause. Across the aisle, the knitting woman wakes for the briefest moment and looks at the two of them. A soft expression crosses her face. She has no need to speak. She lowers her eyes. Her own hands rest on the grey wool in her lap. Perhaps she has children grown now. Perhaps she never did. Perhaps the sight simply belongs to everyone. A child sleeping safely under a blanket is a language anyone can understand. The shelter returns to quiet. A faint sound comes from above. Perhaps a cart. Perhaps a distant engine. Perhaps only water moving in a drain. It travels down the stairwell in a softened form and dissolves before reaching the far benches. No one responds. The people have become accustomed to distant sounds, and the story keeps them distant. Far sounds remain far, soft sounds remain soft. The room remains steady. The warden rests his hand briefly on the back of a bench as he passes. The wood is worn smooth along the top edge. Many hands have touched it. Many people have leaned into it. The bench is not comfortable, but it has served. Like the shelter itself, it has done an imperfect job faithfully. There is comfort in faithful imperfection. A thermos with weak tea, a blanket too short for full comfort, a bench too hard for deep sleep, a lamp too dim for reading easily, but bright enough to guide a step. A shelter too crowded for privacy, but generous enough to hold the neighbourhood. Not perfect, never perfect, but useful, steady, enough. The word has become almost invisible now because it is everywhere. Enough warmth, enough space, enough light, enough sleep, enough care, enough night past, enough strength remaining. The young clerk wakes slightly and opens his eyes without moving. For a few seconds he does not remember where he is. He sees the underside of the lamp, the brick wall, the row of benches, the shapes of sleeping people. Then memory returns calmly. Shelter, night, rain. He does not sit up. He lets his eyes close again. Recognition is quick now because the room has become familiar. Even a strange place can become familiar after enough hours of shared quiet. The clerk's fingers rest on the edge of his satchel. Inside is his book. He does not need it. Knowing it is there is enough. Near the entrance, the man with the cap over his eyes wakes, removes the cap, looks toward the stairs, and puts it back over his eyes. The gesture is almost comic in its simplicity, but no one laughs. He has checked the world and decided it is not time to rise. So he returns to darkness. Sometimes a person needs only one glance to know that rest may continue. The warden notices and smiles faintly to himself. Not a smile of amusement, a smile of recognition. He has done similar things. Everyone has. A quick look at the world, then back under the blanket. The shelter allows it. The mother with 3 children begins to wake because one of the children has shifted too close to the edge of the bench. Her hand moves before her eyes open. She draws the child back by the blanket gently, expertly, without disturbing the others. Then her eyes open. She looks at the row of little bodies arranged around her, all present, all sleeping. She exhales, closes her eyes, and remains still. Another small check completed. The night continues. The warden's lamp catches the damp coat near the entrance. It no longer drips. The wool is still wet, but the surface has dried slightly. By morning it will be unpleasant to put on, but less so than before. The shelter has not made it dry, only drier. The same way it has not made people rested, only more rested. Not comfortable, only more comfortable. Not safe in every possible sense, only safe enough for this hour. Human comfort often comes in degrees, and degrees matter. A little warmer can change a night. A little quieter can bring sleep. A little light can guide the hand. A little kindness can make a crowded bench feel less lonely. The story remains with these small degrees because they are the truth of the shelter. Margaret stirs and opens her eyes. This time, when she wakes, she feels that she has truly slept for a short while. The room is the same, but softer. Peter is still asleep. The blanket is still in place. The bag is still under the bench. The warden is a few yards away, speaking quietly with someone near the entrance. The lamps glow. The rain has nearly stopped. She takes a breath and notices that her chest feels less tight. Not joyful, not refreshed, only a little easier, a little more able. Sleep, even in fragments, has done its work. She does not move yet. She lets herself enjoy the rare moment of waking before needing to act. In bed at home, this moment might pass unnoticed. Here, it feels precious. The first awareness. The child still sleeping. The room still calm. The night still holding. She closes her eyes again, not to sleep, but to rest in the knowledge. The old woman with the basket wakes too. She lifts the cloth and looks inside. Whatever she seeks is there. She lowers the cloth again. Her husband remains asleep. She adjusts the scarf around his neck. Her hand is slow and careful. He does not wake. After so many years together, perhaps she knows how to move around his sleep the way one knows how to move around furniture in darkness. The gesture belongs to long companionship. No words, only adjustment, warmth, care. She looks down the shelter toward the entrance, then back at the basket. Not yet morning, not quite. She closes her eyes. The young woman with the letter now wakes more fully. She takes the paper from her bag and opens it. The light is low, but enough to see the shape of her writing, if not every word easily. She reads a line, then another. Her face changes slightly, not dramatically, only with the private feeling of words meant for someone absent. She does not write more. Instead, she folds the letter again, more carefully this time, smoothing the crease with her thumb. Perhaps she will finish it later. Perhaps the most important part has already been written. She places it back in the bag and closes the flap. The letter sleeps again. The warden passes her and does not look at the page. A person's letter is a room of its own. Even in a shelter, some rooms should remain closed. At the centre of the shelter, the lamps hum softly or seem to hum. Perhaps it is not the lamps, but the air itself. The mind, when tired, gives sound to light. The amber glow feels like a low note. Steady, warm, continuous. It fills the space between breathing and rain. If the shelter had a song, it would be this. Not melody, not music, only a held tone of lamps, sleep, and waiting. For the listener, that tone can become a place to rest. Imagine it. A warm amber note beneath London, held under the rain, held under the street, held around benches and blankets, held around sleeping people, a note that does not ask you to follow it, only to sink into it. The man who had offered a mint earlier wakes and offers one silently to the sleepless man beside him, who is awake again. This time, the man accepts. The tin opens. One small sweet passes from hand to hand. The tin closes. Both men nod. A whole conversation contained in a mint. The sweetness is small, but in the damp underground air it matters. It gives the mouth something clean to hold. It gives the body a little signal that comfort has not disappeared. The men sit side by side without speaking. After a while, one closes his eyes, then the other. The warden adjusts the angle of a lamp near the far wall. It had begun to shine too directly into a sleeping woman's face. The movement is small. The shade turns. The light falls lower. The woman's brow smooths. She does not wake. The warden steps back and sees that the light now touches the floor instead, leaving her face in gentler shadow. Good. He moves on. Such adjustments are the quiet craft of the night. Not large enough to be noticed, important enough to be felt. Margaret sits up a little and slowly stretches her fingers. Her body is stiff from the bench. The back of her neck aches. One foot has gone slightly numb. She changes position carefully, a little at a time so Peter does not wake. The body protests, then accepts the new arrangement. She pulls the blanket edge more securely around Peter's legs and tucks it beneath one knee. The motion is efficient and tender. She has done versions of it countless times. At home, on trains, in waiting rooms, in chairs, and now here. Wherever a child sleeps, a mother makes a bed around him out of whatever exists. A blanket, a coat, A shoulder, a lap, a bench, a corner of a shelter. The shelter watches without watching. Around them, people continue to sleep. The warden reaches the entrance again and hears, for the first time, not rain, but the sound after rain. Drops falling from gutters. A distant wheel on wet pavement. Water moving along the curb. The air above is changing. He does not announce it. There is no need. The room will wake soon enough by degrees. For now, he lets the quiet remain. He stands at the bottom of the steps and looks upward. The stairwell is still dim, but the blackness at the top has softened to grey. A wet grey. London grey. The kind of grey that belongs to overcast mornings, damp bricks, and smoke beginning to rise. He lowers his gaze and returns to the room. The night has been carried this far. Only a little more remains. He feels tiredness in his knees now, the kind that comes after walking quietly for hours. His coat is heavy, his eyes are dry, but the room is calm, and that gives him strength. A calm room gives back to the person who tends it, not all at once, not dramatically, but gently. The people sleeping are proof that his walking mattered. The quiet is proof that the lamps were right. The absence of confusion is proof that many small things were done well. He takes one slow breath and begins another round. At Margaret's bench, Peter shifts and opens his eyes for less than a second. He sees his mother. That is enough. His eyes close again. Margaret smiles faintly. To wake and see the person you need most and then return to sleep is one of the simplest forms of safety. The shelter has allowed that. For a little while, this underground room has made a child feel that sleep can continue. The story holds that image gently. A child opening his eyes, seeing his mother, sleeping again, nothing more needed. Across the aisle, the knitting woman also sees it, and her own eyes soften. She reaches for the grey wool and this time pulls it fully into her lap. The morning is close enough now that she begins another row. Click, pause, click, pause. The sound is almost like a clock but warmer. A clock measures time. Knitting uses time. Turns it into something wearable, something made, something that may warm someone later. Her hands move slowly. The shelter's quiet is not broken by the clicking. It is enriched. Margaret listens to it and lets it become part of the room's rhythm. Click, breath, drip, lamp. Click, breath, drip, lamp. The old man with the basket wakes and watches the knitting for a while. His eyes are half closed. Perhaps the movement soothes him. Perhaps it reminds him of someone at home. He says nothing. His wife sleeps. The basket remains between them. The young clerk wakes again and finally sits forward, rubbing his face with both hands. He is done sleeping, perhaps, or he thinks he is. He looks toward the entrance, then around at the others, then takes his book from the satchel. But instead of opening it, he simply holds it in both hands. The cover's cool, solid, a thing from his own life. He looks at it for a while, then places it back. Not reading can be restful too. A book can comfort without being opened. Margaret thinks of the book in her own bag and understands this without knowing she understands. A familiar object is a small piece of continuity. It says, not everything changes at night. Some things are carried through. The story now circles the shelter one more time, slowly. At the entrance, wet steps, a hooded lamp, the smell of rain fading into grey morning. Near the first benches, coats hung heavily, hats resting on knees, a man with a mint, a woman with a sleeping child. Farther down, the old couple with the basket, hands near each other. Across the aisle, Margaret and Peter, blanket warm, bag closed, book inside. A little farther, the knitting woman, grey wool growing by tiny increments. Beyond her, the clerk with his satchel and closed book. Near the far wall, the mother with 3 children, now all sleeping. At the end, the draught softened by a coat. Between all of them, the warden walking. Around all of them, brick. Above all of them, London. The room is complete. Not complete because everything is finished, but complete because everything has found its place for this hour. The rain has nearly ended. The night has nearly turned. The people are nearly ready to wake, though not yet. The shelter is nearly a passage again, though still a bedroom for a little while longer. Nearly is a gentle word at this hour. Nearly morning, nearly dry, nearly rested, nearly time, but not yet, not quite yet. There is still a small pocket of night remaining, and the story rests inside it. Margaret lets her head lean back. Peter's breath continues. The warden's lamp moves slowly away. The knitting needles pause. A drip falls near the entrance. The city above waits. The city below breathes. For the listener, this is the last deep place before the morning part of the story begins. You may stay here. You may not need the morning. You may let the shelter remain forever in this soft, almost time. The moment before waking. The moment after rain. The moment when lamps are still needed. The moment when blankets are still warm. The moment when people are still held together in quiet. Let the moment lengthen. Let the brick walls fade. Let the lamps blur. Let the rain become only memory. Let the breathing become the whole room. Let the shelter become a calm, dim, protected place beneath every thought. Nothing to do, nothing to carry, nothing to gather yet. Only rest. Only the last soft pocket of night. Only the quiet knowledge that the watch has been kept. The lamps have stayed low. The children have slept. The letters have been saved. The blankets have held, and morning can wait a little longer. The warden turns once more at the end of the room. He looks back. The shelter is still. Warm in patches, cool in corners, human everywhere. He nods to himself, barely. The gesture is small, but it contains the whole night. All right. Still all right. He begins to walk back through the dim amber light, and the story walks with him, slowly, softly, toward the quiet before morning. The quiet before morning is different from the quiet of midnight. Midnight is deep and uncertain, with the long hours still stretching ahead, but the quiet before morning carries a faint promise inside it, even when no light is visible, even when the lamps remain low, even when the shelter still feels like a room outside of ordinary time. It is a softer quiet, a tired quiet, a quiet that has already carried much of the night and now asks only for a little more patience. The people in the shelter do not all sense it at once. Some sleep too deeply to notice anything. Some are awake but too weary to think of morning clearly. Some drift in and out, hearing the rain, the warden's footsteps, the little movements of coats and blankets, and allowing all of it to become part of the same slow dream. Margaret remains awake now, though only lightly. She's not sitting up in full attention. Her body is still resting. Her back is against the brick wall. Her coat is pulled around her. Peter sleeps beside her, curled toward the inside of the bench, the blanket tucked beneath his chin. His face is softer in sleep, younger than he tries to appear during the day. The pillow has slipped slightly, but not enough to trouble him. Margaret adjusts nothing. Sometimes the best way to care for sleep is to leave it alone. Across the aisle, the old couple remain still. The woman's gloved hands rest on the basket. The man breathes through his mouth faintly, with a small dry sound that comes and goes. The young clerk's book has slipped closed on his lap. The title is hidden under his hand. His head leans against the wall behind him, and his cap sits low over one eye. The knitting woman has slept so upright for so long that she looks almost like part of the bench, a quiet shape of coat, scarf, and folded hands. The shelter has become a landscape of rest. Not perfect rest, not deep bed rest, but the kind of rest that belongs to people who have learned to accept unusual places as temporary rooms. A shoulder against brick, a coat for a pillow, a bag beneath the feet, a thermos beside the knee, a child leaning into a parent, a blanket shared between two sisters, a newspaper folded under an elbow. The floor is hard, the air is damp, but the lamps are soft. The voices are low, the rain has faded, and the long room holds. At the far end, the warden rises from his brief rest. He does it slowly, quietly, as if not to disturb the stillness he's been trusted with. His notebook goes back into his pocket. He lifts the small lamp and turns the shade slightly so the glow points downward. The light falls over the floor in a warm circle. Dust moves through it. His shoes make almost no sound as he begins another round. Not because there is anything urgent to check, only because rounds are the rhythm of his night. To walk is to keep the room known. To look is to reassure himself that all remains well. To be seen, even briefly, is to reassure others that someone is awake. He passes the first row of benches. A man there is sitting awake with his elbows on his knees staring at the floor. He is not distressed, only sleepless. The warden pauses and whispers, "All right?" The man nods. All right. Nothing more is needed. The warden moves on. Sleeplessness is not always pain. Sometimes it is simply the body waiting while the mind empties itself. The man continues looking at the floor. The floor shines faintly where damp shoes have polished it through the night. A small thread from someone's scarf lies near the bench leg. An empty paper wrapper is tucked under a bag so it does not blow or slide away. He notices these things because there is nothing else to do, and noticing small things can be calming. He takes a slow breath, lets it out. The shelter remains quiet. Margaret watches the warden pass. His lamp glides over the lower bricks, over the bench legs, over a pair of boots, over a child's mitten fallen beside a bag. He stops, bends, picks up the mitten, and places it gently on the bag nearest the sleeping child. A mitten saved. A tiny piece of warmth preserved for morning. Then he continues. Margaret feels the tenderness of the gesture more than she thinks about it. A shelter survives on such things. A mitten noticed, a blanket raised, a letter put away, a cup moved from the edge. In the morning, most people may not remember who did what, but the effects remain. Things are not lost. People are not woken unnecessarily. The night passes more gently because someone has noticed small needs before they become larger ones. Above ground, the rain has nearly stopped now. The city is wet and black, with water shining along the pavements and on the tops of walls. The clouds hang low over the roofs. A faint greyness is gathering somewhere behind them, so faint that it might not yet be called morning. The blackout curtains still cover the windows. The streets are mostly still. At the corner, the postbox stands with beads of water on its curved top. A narrow alley smells of wet stone and coal smoke. A drain pipe releases the last drops from a roof in slow intervals. One drop, a pause, another drop, a longer pause. The city is coming gradually out of rain, but not yet into day. In a nearby house, a kitchen clock ticks in darkness. A kettle waits on a stove. 2 chairs stand pushed close to a table. A small pile of folded washing rests near the hearth, left there when the family went below. The covered window makes the room feel blind, but not empty. Home waits. Many homes are waiting like this above the shelter. Rooms paused. Beds unmade or unused. Cups left on shelves. Curtains pinned tight. Coats missing from hooks because they are being worn underground. A whole city of rooms holding their breath until people return. Below, Peter stirs. Margaret looks down immediately. His eyes do not open. He only shifts deeper into the blanket, pressing one hand beneath his cheek. His mouth relaxes. A small line of hair falls across his forehead. Margaret moves it back with the lightest touch. He does not wake. She keeps her hand near his head for a moment, then withdraws. The gesture is so familiar that it might have happened in any bedroom, on any night, in any peaceful year. For a few seconds, the shelter feels less like a shelter and more like a dim nursery, a place where children sleep under watchful eyes. The warden returns from the far end. The man who'd been sleepless now leans back with his eyes closed. Not asleep yet, but closer. The woman with the letter is still resting, the paper safe in her bag. The elderly woman with the basket opens one eye as the warden passes, then closes it again. The warden checks the lamp nearest Margaret. It is burning well, low and steady. He adjusts nothing. The best lamp is one that does not need attention. He moves on. The lamps make a chain through the shelter, not bright enough to erase darkness, only enough to make darkness gentle. Each lamp seems to say the same thing. Here is a little light, only a little. Enough for the floor, enough for the bench, enough for a sleeping face, enough for a hand finding a blanket, enough to remind the room that it is held. The story returns to that word again. Enough. Enough light. Enough warmth. Enough space. Enough quiet. Enough patience. Enough night behind them. Enough morning ahead. For a sleep story, enough is a soft word. It does not demand that everything be perfect. It does not ask the listener to fix the world. It simply says this moment can be rested inside. The shelter has become enough. Margaret reaches into the bag and touches the thermos. It is nearly empty. She does not pour more. The last tea can wait until Peter wakes, or until they begin the journey home. She closes the bag quietly. The book rests inside beside the mugs. The sandwich wrapper is folded. The biscuit tin is closed. Everything has its place. Not because the bag is tidy in any grand way, but because order helps when the mind is tired. Morning departures are easier when objects are where the hand expects them. Thermos, mug, book, scarf, tin, pillow, blanket, child. The list passes through her mind without words. Across from her, the knitting woman wakes and looks around. She does not seem surprised to find herself there. She simply returns from sleep into the shelter as one returns to a familiar room. Her hands move first to the bag with the wool, still there, then to her scarf, still in place. Then she looks at Margaret, sees Peter sleeping, and gives another small nod. Margaret nods back. This too is part of the shelter's morning before morning. People waking briefly and confirming the little world still exists. You are here, I am here. The child sleeps. The bag remains, the lamp still burns. The night has passed a little further. The knitting woman removes one glove and rubs her fingers. Her hands must be stiff from holding still. She does not take out the knitting. Instead, she flexes her fingers slowly, then folds them together inside the glove again. Some work belongs to daylight. Some work belongs to waiting. Some work can sleep in a bag until it is needed. The young clerk wakes with a slight start when his book slips from his lap to the bench. He catches it before it falls to the floor. The motion is quick, but quiet. He looks around, embarrassed for no reason. No one minds. Several people did not even notice. He closes the book properly now and places it inside his satchel. The act gives him a small sense of completion. A book put away. A night nearly past. He rubs his eyes. The lamps look hazy for a moment, then clearer. He's not fully rested, but he's less tired than before. A short sleep can be a bridge, not a destination. Only a bridge from one part of the night to the next. He crosses it slowly. Near the entrance, someone begins to fold a blanket. The warden sees and says softly that there is no rush yet. The person nods and stops folding. No rush. The words move gently through those who hear them. No rush. Morning is coming, but not demanding. The shelter does not need to empty all at once. There is time to wait carefully, time to gather mugs, time to wrap scarves, time to let children open their eyes slowly, time to climb damp steps without hurry, time to return to the wet streets above. No rush. Margaret likes the phrase. She lets it settle in her chest. No rush. Peter can sleep a little longer. She can sit a little longer. The thermos can stay closed a little longer. The city can remain distant a little longer. The shelter can hold them for a few more breaths. Outside, the first true grey of morning begins behind the clouds. It is not visible as light underground, but it changes the world above. The rain-dark rooftops become shapes rather than only darkness. The top edges of chimneys separate from the sky. Puddles along the street turn from black to pewter. A sparrow, hidden somewhere in the eaves, shifts once but does not yet sing. A milk cart wheel creaks in a yard very softly. Someone opens a back door and closes it again. The city begins with small sounds, not the loud rush of day, only little signs that night is loosening its hold. In the shelter, the change arrives through people. A man sits up straighter. A mother wraps a scarf around a sleeping child before waking him. The old woman with the basket opens it and checks the contents properly this time. The warden speaks with another helper near the entrance. The young clerk stands, stretches carefully, then sits again when he realizes others are still sleeping. The lamps remain on. They will not be extinguished yet. Their amber light continues to make the underground room its own soft world. Peter opens his eyes, only halfway. He looks at the brick wall opposite him, not understanding for a moment where he is. Then he sees the bench, the lamp, the people, his mother. The shelter returns. He does not speak. Margaret touches his shoulder. "Morning soon," she whispers. He nods, but his eyes close again. Not asleep, only unwilling to leave the last warmth of the blanket. Margaret smiles faintly. She opens the bag and pours the last of the tea into the smaller mug. It is barely warm. She hands it to him. He takes it with both hands as he did earlier, though now his fingers are slower. The tea helps him become himself again. He drinks, makes no face this time. A sleepy child accepts lukewarm tea as easily as hot, if the cup is familiar. Margaret folds the book more securely into the bag and reaches for the dry scarf. Peter's hair is flattened on one side. His cheeks are warm from sleep. The shelter has left a mark on him, not a visible one, but a softness, a slight heaviness. He's old enough to remember some of these nights later. Perhaps not clearly, perhaps only in pieces. The lamps, the benches, the smell of tea, his mother's coat, rain above, the warden's little lamp moving along the floor. Memory often keeps atmosphere more faithfully than events. It keeps the colour of light, the texture of wool, the sound of a mug, the warmth of a hand. People begin to gather their things with careful slowness. The shelter does not wake abruptly. It rustles. A cloth bag closes, a thermos cap tightens, a newspaper folds. A child asks a question in a small morning voice. Someone laughs softly, only once, not enough to disturb those still sleeping. A bench creaks as an old man stands. His wife takes his arm. The basket is lifted. The knitting woman places her bag over her wrist and checks under the bench with her foot for anything dropped. The young clerk buttons his coat. The woman with the letter opens her bag and finds the folded paper there. Safe. She looks puzzled for a moment, then grateful, though she may never know who put it away. The warden moves among them, reminding people that the steps may be wet. He does not hurry them. He helps one person adjust a load. He carries a small bag for the elderly man. He returns the child's mitten to its owner. The mitten is accepted sleepily and pushed into a pocket. Another tiny task completed. The lamps continue burning. The shelter changes from sleeping room to passage again. This transformation happens every morning. The benches become benches again, not beds. The bags become luggage again, not bedside tables. The thermoses become things to carry, not anchors of warmth. The people become pedestrians, neighbours, workers, mothers, clerks, children, and old couples again. But for a few hours they were a household beneath the city. Margaret feels this as she folds the blanket. She folds it carefully, not perfectly, because Peter is leaning against her side and she has only so many hands. Peter holds the pillow and his mug. He looks very serious, as if entrusted with important objects. Margaret closes the bag. She checks the bench. Nothing left. She checks under it. Nothing. The place where they sat already looks less personal. A hard bench, a brick wall, a little warmth fading. Soon someone else will sit there. Another night, perhaps. Another bag, another blanket, another child. The shelter keeps no names. It simply holds whoever comes. As they wait for space on the steps, Margaret looks once more along the room. The elderly couple are moving slowly toward the exit. The knitting woman is helping a child with a scarf. The young clerk has paused near the wall to let others pass. The warden stands by the entrance, his lamp now unnecessary but still in hand. The room is lighter in mood, though not in light. Morning is near. The air feels cooler as more people stand and move. The underground warmth begins to break apart. Peter leans against Margaret. She places a hand on his shoulder. They move with the line. One step. Pause. Another step. Pause. At the foot of the stairs, the smell changes again. The shelter smell of wool, brick, tea, and close air begins to mix with the outside smell of wet pavement, morning smoke and rain-washed stone. Peter looks up the steps. The entrance above is grey, not black now. That is how morning first appears from below. Not as sunrise, not as gold, only grey. A soft square of wet London grey at the top of the stairs. The handrail is still cold. Margaret holds it with one hand and keeps the other near Peter. They climb slowly. The steps are damp but passable. People ahead of them emerge into the street one by one. A woman lifts her collar. An old man adjusts his hat. A child blinks at the sky. The warden's warning about the wet steps proves useful. Everyone moves carefully. At the top, the air is cold and fresh after the shelter. Margaret breathes it in. It smells of rain, soot, stone, and morning. The street is quiet. The rain has stopped. Water drips from gutters and railings. The sky is overcast, pale grey behind the rooftops. The blackout curtains remain in the windows, but the world no longer feels like night. The pavement shines. A bicycle still leans near the railing, wet and still. The newspaper at the curb has become unreadable, a dark folded shape. A milk cart is passing at the far end of the street, slow and ordinary. Somewhere, a door opens. Someone speaks softly. London is returning. Not loudly, not brightly, just returning. Margaret and Peter stand for a moment near the shelter entrance, adjusting to the open air. Peter holds the pillow under one arm. His scarf is crooked. Margaret fixes it. He does not object. The city looks washed and tired. The bricks are dark with rain. Chimneys release thin smoke into the grey morning. A small puddle reflects the covered window of a house. The clouds move slowly. There are no dramatic signs in this moment. Only a wet street after a long night and people walking home with blankets and bags. The elderly couple pass them, moving carefully. The woman with the knitting nods goodbye, though no names have been exchanged. Margaret nods back. The young clerk hurries slightly now, perhaps remembering work or an errand. But even his hurry is muted by tiredness. The warden remains at the entrance, watching people go, making sure no one has left anything essential behind. His lamp is turned off now. In daylight it looks smaller, ordinary. But during the night, it was a little moon beneath the city. Margaret and Peter begin the walk home. The street is not far. Their shoes sound softly on wet pavement. Peter is still sleepy and walks close beside her. The blanket is folded under Margaret's arm. The bag is heavier than it was when they descended, though it contains the same things. Perhaps fatigue adds weight. Perhaps mourning does. They pass brick houses with covered windows, a railing beaded with rain, a doorstep where water has gathered in a shallow pool, a cat watching from under a cart. The city is quiet enough that their footsteps feel important, but not too important. Just morning footsteps. A woman ahead unlocks a door and disappears inside. A man shakes water from an umbrella, though the rain has ended. Smoke rises from a chimney and drifts along the roofline. The ordinary world is returning in pieces. A kettle will be lit. A stove will be checked. Windows will remain covered until they may be uncovered. Cups will be washed. Blankets will be hung to dry if there is space. Children will be urged to eat something. Adults will feel the night in their bones and continue anyway. London mornings after shelter nights are not grand. They are practical. A return to rooms, to kettles, to bread, to work, to school if there is school, to errands, to making the bed that was not slept in, to hanging damp coats, to folding the shelter blanket again. At their door, Margaret pauses. She takes the key from her pocket. Peter leans against the wall, nearly asleep, standing up. The key turns. The door opens into the small hallway, dark but familiar. Home smells different from the shelter. Cooler, quieter, a little stale from being closed, but home. Margaret lets Peter go in first. He places the pillow on a chair and stands there as if unsure what comes next. She closes the door gently. The sound is soft, final, comforting. Inside, the rooms have waited. The kitchen cloth remains over the chair. The kettle is where she left it. The window covering is still secure. The toy near the hearth has not moved. The cups on the shelf are exactly as they were. Nothing has changed, and the sameness is a gift. Margaret sets down the bag. She removes her coat, then Peter's. She places the blanket over the back of a chair to air. It hangs there heavy and creased from the shelter bench. Peter sits at the table with his head in his hands, not upset, only tired. Margaret lights the stove carefully. A small flame begins. The kettle is filled. The morning begins in the kitchen. Not with brightness, not with excitement, only with water, flame, and the promise of tea. Peter's eyes close at the table. Margaret touches his shoulder and tells him he can rest a little longer. He nods. She guides him not to his bedroom yet, but to a chair nearer the hearth, wrapping the dry end of the blanket around him. He curls into it without protest. The shelter night has followed them home, but now it is softening into ordinary morning tiredness. The kettle warms. Steam begins slowly. The window remains darkened, but a faint grey outline shows around the edges. Margaret sits for a moment before doing anything else. Only a moment. She listens to the kettle, to Peter breathing, to the quiet street beyond the door, to the house settling around them. The shelter is no longer around her, but its rhythm remains. Rain, lamp, blanket, breath. Now replaced by kettle, chair, blanket, breath. The form changes. The comfort continues. She pours tea when the water is ready. 1 cup for herself, a little for Peter if he wakes. She holds the cup and lets the warmth enter her hands. There will be things to do soon, always things to do, but not in this breath. In this breath, the night has been carried. The child is home. The rain has stopped. The kettle is warm. The room is familiar. Enough. Far away beneath the street, the shelter is emptying further. The warden walks the benches once more. He collects a forgotten wrapper. He finds no lost bags. He places one folded scarf aside for its owner, who will surely come back. The lamps are turned down one by one. The long room grows dimmer. Without people, the shelter becomes brick, concrete, benches, and quiet again. But it holds the memory of the night in small ways. A warm place on a bench cooling slowly, a damp mark where a coat had hung, a biscuit crumb near the wall, a scuff on the floor, a little steam still fading from a mug someone finished before leaving. By evening, perhaps, people will come again, or perhaps not. The shelter will wait either way. Shelters are patient places. They do not ask questions. They simply open when needed, hold what they can, release people back into the city when morning comes. The warden stands at the entrance for a while after the last few have gone. The grey morning light reaches partway down the steps. The air below is still warmer than the street. He takes a slow breath. His night is nearly finished. He is tired, but the shelter was calm. That matters. He turns one lamp off, then another. The glow recedes. The brick walls lose their amber warmth and become ordinary again. Still, the night has not vanished. It has only moved into memory. In Margaret's kitchen, Peter has fallen asleep again in the chair, wrapped in the blanket. His head is tilted to one side. The cup of tea meant for him waits untouched. Margaret does not wake him. She drinks her own tea slowly and watches the faint grey light around the covered window. The city outside begins its day quietly. A cart passes. A door closes. A voice calls softly and then fades. The kettle ticks as it cools. The stove gives a small sigh. Margaret's hands are wrapped around the cup. She's too tired to think far ahead. That is all right. The next hour will come, then the next. For now, she has this room, this chair, this child asleep, this warm cup, this gentle morning after a long night below. For you, listening now, the story can begin to loosen too. The shelter has done its work. The rain has passed. The people have climbed the steps. The lamps have been lowered. The city has returned in grey and silver. You do not need to follow the day. You may stay with the softest parts of the night. The amber lamps under the street. The rain softened by brick. The long benches lined with blankets. The warm thermos. The worn book. The warden's quiet footsteps. The child asleep against his mother's coat. The letter saved in a bag, the mitten placed where it would be found, the gentle agreement of many tired people to be quiet together. Let those images remain, and let the rest fade. Let the shelter become a soft underground room. Let the lamps glow lower. Let the rain become only a murmur. Let the benches blur. Let the faces become peaceful shapes. Let the city above become distant. Let the morning wait. There is nothing urgent for you to do now. Nothing to gather, nothing to carry, nothing to check beneath the bench, nothing to remember except perhaps one small image. A warm mug held in both hands, or a blanket rising and falling with a sleeping child's breath, or an old brick wall glowing under a low lamp, or rain tapping softly on London streets far above. Choose one image, or choose none. The story will hold them for you. You may let your own body grow heavier. Let your shoulders sink. Let the jaw soften, let the hands rest, let the breath come and go naturally, quietly, without effort, like rain, like sleep, like a city settling after a long night. The shelter is quiet now, the lamps are low, the benches are still, the people are home, or nearly home. Peter sleeps in a chair by the warming stove. Margaret holds her tea and closes her eyes for a moment. The warden turns the last lamp down and listens to the calm room. Above, London breathes in the pale morning. Below, the shelter rests. All is held. All is quiet. All is enough. And as this old London morning rises gently beyond the covered windows, you may drift with the last softness of the story, deeper and slower until the words become distant. The rain becomes silence, the lamplight becomes darkness, and the darkness becomes sleep.